Welcome into the Show 6 podcast, where we break down the championship series for Pokemon Go. In this episode, we begin in Lille, where 162 trainers competed. The Frenchman Hikhami proved to be unstoppable as he powered through the grand finals and grand finals reset, winning 6 games in a row. Next, we head to Brisbane, where 43 trainers registered to compete. Outside of the Aussie battlers, 8 trainers from out of region placed within the top 25, including 6 from the TPC region. Australia prevailed in the end, though, as Gone claimed the title. Finally, we conclude with another EU regional championship in Gdansk, where 95 trainers competed. PvP David pulled off a reverse sweep to deny Boom the bracket reset, taking the crown for himself in the end. The 2026 competitive season continues to be one of the most dynamic seasons ever, filled with upsets, underdog stories, sudden meta shifts, and unpredictable finishes. We'll uncover why top players are seemingly underperforming, answer if the competitive community is healthy, and take a look forward to what we can look forward to in the coming weeks. That and so much more. So if you're ready, lock in, good luck, and have fun. Welcome back, everyone, to the Show 6 podcast, where we break down the championship series in excruciating detail. We've got 3 tournaments to cover and a lot to talk about. Also, our winners of the Into the Wild, contest that we posted about, where we're going to be giving away 2 of those tickets for the upcoming event, which is going to be really exciting. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Z Zwilis. How are you feeling, my friend?
Hello, sweetie. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling this is going to be a long episode once again, but I'm totally up for it. Like there's so much to talk about. My region, the European region, has had 2 major events. And honestly, like we talk about end of season meta changes a lot, like once every 3 months at the end of the day. This felt like we got a meta shift without a move update because honestly, like nothing looked the same after Lille and Gdansk.
I agree. So I'm just going to start this off just right off the bat. I'm going to swing for the fences here, ZZ. Was there a meeting before each of these EU tournaments where all the trainers got together and they all made a pact to not play Bastion? Where was this meeting held? And what degree of secrecy was this meeting undertook? And why did the public not know about this?
Speedy, there was no official meeting, but like the main difference between a lot of things in Europe and in North America is that in Europe, we have a lot of regulations for stuff. Like if you look at the list of ingredients, it's usually a lot shorter in Europe when it comes to certain foods and stuff. And I guess it's just the same for Show 6 teams that like Bastiodon by the EU Commission is being labeled as an unhealthy Pokemon.
Toxic?
And therefore, yeah. And therefore we're just looking out for our citizens and therefore it's just not legal to be brought into
Mm.
an EU tournament.
So when we kicked off this episode, I didn't ever expect that we would draw a direct connection between Red 40 and Bastiodon. But here we are, somehow drawing this straight line between Americans drinking Mountain Dew and red colored sodas and playing Bastiodon. Maybe our food says a lot about what we actually think. But yeah, I was amazed, right? I was looking at teams with Zweilous on them, with Abomasnow, with Scizor, Furret, even Florges, right? You know, Florges only beats Bastiodon in the 2s. So I'm looking at all these matches. I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? Why do we not see more Rock Face? I mean, after America set the meta, you would think EU would say, okay, well, you know, we'll follow suit for a little while and see how it works. But no, there was, I swear to you, everybody, there was a secret pact. Everyone wore robes. It was in a dark room in secrecy, and all the EU trainers just swore not to play Bastiodon.
But like honestly, I don't even think that we as Europeans are morally superior for rejecting Mastodon, because when I look at the little top cut, we have 3 Unova Stunfisk in the top 4, and then there's like 2 more in top 8. So I don't know. Like I have feelings about the pancake. I guess it's a very good core breaker, but
It is.
it also has such horrendous neutral matchups. So you do kind of bank on being in a polarizing one, but in one that favors you. Um, and yeah, it's like one of the trends that emerged where previously at the start of the season, people were going on about Tredilli, people were going on about Canto Marowak a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as if we saw a lot of Galarian Moltres, and if we now look into Lille's top 8, I don't think I see a single Galarian Moltres. I don't think a Canto Marowak even made it into day 2.
Nope.
And while there is the occasional Credilli on the teams of Chris LB and Neutan Matsal, um, that was also not the star of the show anymore. Instead, we had Florges rising up. We had Unovan Stunfisk being everywhere. We had Empoleon and Zweilous taking their first championship titles. So a very, very different meta, and one that requires a very different reaction from what we saw in North America.
The Galarian Moltres question is a very interesting one. I think there are really two reasons, right? And you can agree or disagree, or maybe see something that I miss. The two reasons I can think of is first, the rise in fairy types. Belo Horizonte saw Zardy win with Double Fairy, Azumarill, and Tinkaton. But outside of that, the surge in Florges seems to be a big reason why people are shying away from Galarian Moltres and a lot of dark types in general. The second reason is that there are other flyers in the meta. It used to feel like it was only Galarian Moltres with maybe the occasional Corviknight here or there, but we saw a strong surge from Altaria in this meta. We saw a lot of Shadow Talonflame. Shadow Charizard was a thing for like a week, and I think people have moved past that. But point still stands that there's more variety in terms of flying type coverage, and you can kind of pick and choose different things to fit your niche. It doesn't feel like a requirement to play the dark flyer. I don't know if those are the two reasons that you pinpointed or if you see something else.
I think those reasons are pretty good ones. I think another, like more general point about flyers is that we kind of moved past the mud slapping archetype of the ground type. So whereas you could really shut down, say, a Gastrodon, or if you had shields up, also a Kanto Marowak
Mm-hmm.
with your Galarian Moltres, just continuously sucker punching them, being really, really dominant into that ground type damage.
Mm-hmm.
Now the premier ground type appears to be an electric type, instead taking down the Galarian Moltres with relative ease, or even a Clodsire, which has Stone Edge for coverage and also is a pretty threatening matchup all of a sudden. So there's still obviously like utility that your flyer can provide to you. Um, but yeah, there is an argument to be made that the utility that Galarian Moltres used to offer isn't all that valuable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you go for the standard moveset with Fly and Brave Bird, where like if you chose Payback, which we did see in Pittsburgh as a tech briefly, that can actually make it so that you can land the Payback, and then if the Unova Stunfisk didn't shield that, you can dictate swap. So you would have to go down a shield, but after landing a payback, you actually get to farm down a Unova Stunfisk, taking one discharge. This is just
Mm-hmm.
like for the future, if anybody is interested in bringing back out the Galarian Moltres, because targets are still there, right?
Yes.
At least in Lille, we saw a lot of Galarian Corsolas still excelling, and a little bit in Lille, but even more so in Gdansk, we also saw the rise of Furret as the new true neutral Pokemon of the meta. And if you can resist the Furret sucker punches, you also have a very positive matchup there as the Galarian Moltres. So while it
Mm-hmm.
is out of the meta for now, I can see a world in which Galarian Moltres fights for medals again in the near future.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said about targets. I mean, there's still apparently, at least looking here at the Leo results, there is actually a ghost on every single team, whether it's the Glaring Corsola or the Shadow Dust Noir or the Jellicent that Kushner brought, which is definitely a little bit on the spicy side. But there's still targets for it, and that flying type damage, whether it's Fly, Brave Bird, or the dark type damage of Payback, it can go into most places neutrally, which I think is really versatile and useful. It just feels like Altaria with that sub dragon typing, due to the lack of ice in the meta. I have noticed that in seasons past, during the max out meta, we had a lot of kind of ground versus ice, kind of matchups going on. There's a lot less of that now. You don't have ice punch, you don't have powder snow on anything here. It really feels like the Altaria is just in the perfect spot to succeed, especially with the reworked sky attack and flamethrower, which can still scare things like Scizor, some of its hardest counters. Um, what I think is interesting is that Florges first kind of popped up in APAC. I think we saw that in a few tournaments. I think it was prevalent in the Japanese tournament we talked about briefly as well. And it made its way over to EU. A lot of players and casters in NA are still Florges doubters. I think I talked to them about this, and they do not believe in it. But I don't know. That combination of water and grass type coverage is pretty potent. And then you get all those resistances that the fairy typing lends you as well. So you can really hang in a lot of matchups. Were you
I
surprised
will
at all by
say
the
I will
Florges?
say that a lot of NA casters also have a track record of doubting Pokemon that then do really well at the next tournament. So there's that
Fair.
to consider. But yeah, I kind of like I'll say I expected the rise of Florges to a degree. I feel like it's a
Mm,
Pokemon that can comfortably sit at a usage rate of like 15 to 20%, and it wouldn't be crazy. I feel like maybe it overshot that a little bit in Gdansk, but overall it's within like the margin of error that I expected it to be in terms of usage. And I think it's between pacing and flexibility, right? Because it has a lot of the flexibility that an Azumarill gives you, being a fairy type with water coverage. But you just pace so much faster. You're not just sitting there doing your little bubbles until after 15 turns you eventually reach a non-step ice beam. You just get to manipulate the attack set of yourself and your opponent so fast.
mhm,
And yeah, I think it's very similar to Furret in a way, as it's a
mm.
Pokemon that has very neutral matchup that isn't super polarizing, and also just has the pacing and the stat manipulation to become a very flexible option in the hands of many trainers.
So I've been trying to. So before we started recording, I was trying to kind of categorize and classify each region's meta in terms of a theme, right? So I'll read them off to you. I didn't tell you this was coming, so this is we're gonna get ZZ's authentic reaction. Starting with NA, the phrase that came to mind was set and refine. So typically, the first regional of the season is in NA. NA has a tendency to hyper optimize, so it follows that NA tries to select only the strongest Pokemon and methodically grind at the margins of efficiency over time. I think a good example of this is something like Magic Mason's Umbreon team from a couple seasons back, or the over reliance on top meta Pokemon during the Metacham era, or refusing to play core breakers like Dragonair and Alolan Ninetales during the Noctowl, Lantern, Trevenant era, right? Things like that all seem very NA coded. So for EU, I have Core Break and Iterate. So EU places high emphasis on core breakers and upsetting the existing meta. They have a strong desire to win with signature Pokemon and to crack the existing paradigm. This reliance on core breakers can sometimes lead to its own inverse sense of RPS, in which matchups between core breakers can lead to unconventional situations. So, a perfect example for me when I think of this in EU: Talonflame and Abomasnow. Both of them, stellar core breakers in their own rights, fill wildly different roles, but you don't see those two Pokemon paired up in NA because people are
Yeah,
not thinking in that
I
direction,
think
right?
that has never happened. And Hikami winning with both of these on his team was like the most EU thing to happen. Like
Exactly.
that was
Exactly.
on nobody's bingo card. But
Yeah.
again, like sometimes those moments pop up. We had that in Dortmund a couple of years back, so
Mhm.
it's just an EU thing.
Yeah, I'm still working on my LATAM and my OC breakdowns, or I guess you would say like kind of like distillations of the meta personality of the region. But for right now, for LATAM, I have Pinpoint and Protect. LATAM is very open to the idea of having one just incredible core breaker on the team, and then having multiple Pokemon around it to support it. And the first example that comes to mind for me is JW Naldo and Toxapex back at LAIC in 2023. I mean, Pokemon that nobody sees coming, but actually being well supported and relied on heavily. But I don't know if that stands for every LATAM tournament or if that's a unified enough theory. So I'm still workshopping that. But the point I'm
One
Go
thing,
ahead.
okay, I have like one more interjection for the LATAM theory, because one
Yes.
thing that I tend to observe during like LATAM tournaments, or at least on the graphics that get released for LATAM tournaments, is that not always we did have Belo Horizonte where we had 18 unique species in top three, but oftentimes you have teams that are maybe built in cooperation with one another because a lot of the top players are very well interconnected, but that then look pretty much identical. So you can easily get like an overrepresentation of a Pokemon like Dedenne, like Murkrow, like Tinkaton, like
Mm,
Fortress, where maybe the origin of that is just the top players conspiring, quote unquote, to bring this one dominant team that they figured out would be a very like effective approach against the established meta, and
mm.
then that leads to like, oh, we have 75% of this Pokemon that we don't see anywhere else, whereas
Fair.
with EU, like everybody wants to be special in a way, and everybody has their own little weird Pokemon that they like to bring.
That's such a good point. So the note that I took here was overrepresentation of specific Pokemon due to team building. So
Yeah,
7-Eleven, the GB Lindos, those examples stand out.
it's pretty much that.
That's a really really good insight. So I say all of this to circle back to what I was trying to get at when I look at the EU meta. I see this kind of I'm trying to think of the word to use, but kind of spreading out the roles of each Pokemon and not having things be so localized. What I mean by that is typically in NA, when you look for grass type coverage, there's one answer. It's Cradilly, you've got Grass Knot. Occasionally you'd have a Furret here or there, but that was kind of, in the margins. But then you look at EU and you've got teams that have Furret and Cradilly or Furret and Florges, or maybe even all three, and you've got Trailblaze on two of those three, and you've got Grassland on the other. It really feels like EU doesn't mind spreading out the roles and kind of diversifying a bit more in order to kind of create a different balance, right? So you could have a shape, and depending on how you put items into it, you could fill the shape, but it really kind of takes on a different form once you have all the pieces in place. If that makes sense, like the six Pokemon you use, you can still arrive at a cohesive team, but you can use a completely different formula to build the team.
Yeah, and I feel like we do see some of that represented in the Lil Top Cut as well,
Mm-hmm.
where like even just people choosing such different fire flying types. Using fire flying types in and of itself is not even that common of a thing. Like Talonflame exists and has been fairly successful in EU before, winning Frankfurt in the hands of Inadequance. Um, but what really stood out to me was, for example, the Neutan Matzal team, who is like one of the OGs, I must say, of the EU competitive scene. Like um, a lot of grassroots success over the years without really having that big breakthrough tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But like we know that this is a player who is capable and who has the fundamentals down. But this time he chose to not bring Shadow Talonflame, not bring the classic Ember Shadow Charizard, but instead opting for the Dragon Breath Shadow Charizard, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a viable side grade that nobody ever really uses. But
Sure.
it proved so effective for him in this exact tournament. And I think that also goes to show that EU finds so many different ways and like for to arrive at the exact same coverage that everybody else has, but with like such unique matchups and like sprinkled in their own unique styles and yeah, play styles, I would say. So yeah, this one turn move of Dragon Breath being a lot better into the fire flying mirrors because you do neutral damage instead of resisted one, and you also have
Mm.
more maneuverability with just being such a short turn duration fast attack. I think those choices are they feel very EU to me, where
Mm.
you go a little against the grain and it often pays dividends. And I guess like one of the talking points for Lille was also how this approach let us arrive at a situation where we had a lot more upsets than we would have expected at our average tournament. Um,
Yeah. I just, before we get into the upsets, I just wanted to mention real briefly. I feel like it would be a disservice not to say it because I didn't look at his bracket run, but Noitum, no, how do you say it? Noitum Mud.
it's Last Damnation. It's Last Damnation backwards, but Last Damnation isn't very TPCI friendly.
Okay, Last Damnation. Oh, now it's clicking. His wins were over Cheese Curl. They Love Jai, who's honestly one of the best in Australia. He beat Icelandic Lapras, and he beat Chris LB7 in order to make day two. So that was a thick bracket run in order to get to day two. That was very impressive, and he did it with Dragon Breath, Shadow Charizard, which makes it amazing. Um, yeah, I just wanted to give him his flowers because that was a really impressive run to day two. To your point about upsets, you have some interesting notes you sent me before we started recording. I'll just read this off here. Um, the narrative is the 12th, 11th, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 2nd, 11th, and 3rd seed of each group advance to the winner's side. So 3 proper upsets and 0 out of 8. Again, 0 out of 8 top seeds made it into day 2 on winners or losers side. Like I said in the intro, Zizi, this feels like a season of upsets. What the heck is going on?
I think this feels especially interesting because it happened just after Milwaukee. And we did go into the nitty gritty in terms of, oh, how exceptionally well have the unseededs done in Milwaukee? And we went into winning percentages and how this was like such an open regional with like not really one dominating force that just sweeps through the entire tournament, but
Mm-hmm.
everybody like everything was broad level in a way that we didn't really see in North America. In Europe, I feel as if we see this a little more often, where I think the overall talking point is the European region does not have the numbers that NA has typically. Like Lille was a big regional. Like we had more than 128 competitors. Like we had a top 16 day two, a proper one with two people emerging from 8 groups. So it was large for an EU tournament. But if you compare that to Vegas, which has like almost 220 competitors signed up just now, like there's still like 60ish people missing to match those numbers, and
Mm.
that difference is usually explained in a little bit of a lack of a casual competitive culture in Europe, where people just go to an event because it's like close or because they just want to have a good time with friends, and a lot of the European competition hinges on actually being able and capable and kind of expecting yourself to do so well that you may reach day two, which then results in like 50ish plus people with like real ambitions to make that top 16 and
Mm.
also with a record that shows that they made top 16 before. And I think in an environment like that, where like almost the bulk of the players has like a history of top cutting and just like a very high baseline level, it's very difficult to achieve consistency. And I think what has happened over the years of consistent move updates is that the meta has grown wider and wider. So you can't only like trust your playing instincts, like your general understanding of the game, because everybody is at such a high level
Agreed.
that you cannot just simply outplay and outmaneuver your way out of every situation. And pairing that with a region that already has a tendency to innovate a lot and a meta that allows for so many different Pokemon to be played effectively, you really need to have your meta read on point. Because if you do not, then you will be up against somebody who has maybe a little bit of a better idea of what is going to be good at this particular point in the season, and they're also just like so good and capable. Like we talked about Last Nation, like he was a surprise in day two. He had a very tough bracket run, but he's also somebody who's been like a household name in grassroots competition since like at least 2022 2021.
Exactly.
So like it's not as if like random people were just coming up all of a sudden and taking the spots of those top competitors. It's just that we're at a point where every top competitor really has to be tuned in and at the pulse of the meta, because if you're not, other people will be.
Hmm. I think that's such a good point. It's one of those things where historically, in the grassroots sense, we came from limited metas. I remember ZC. I remember when I was in Tampa and I was doing our local tournaments. We would have a weekly Open Great League, and we call it Freestyle Friday, and that was like the exception where you only played freestyle Friday. You only played Open Great League once a week or once every 2 weeks, and that was outside of all of your self metas. That was all auxiliary. I would play Blind Noon in a lot of my freestyle Fridays, right? That's the level I was at. Um, and I feel like conditionally coming from a limited meta background where you knew what targets were coming, you knew what was going to happen. It felt like a lot of trainers kind of leaned into that, and they had these expectations going into the championship series. And to your point, especially over the past 3 or 4 seasons, the net of the meta has expanded tremendously. I'm trying to find the post right now, but Pataman did make a post about how this meta was tough because you can practice all you want, you can team build the best that you possibly can, but you really at the end of the day just have to hope that you don't run into that core breaker that you don't want to see. Again, I'm paraphrasing, I can't find the exact post, but I remember seeing him say that and thinking, yeah, that's actually really relevant. And I think this happens in other Pokemon games as well, where you can have a standard meta team, but then you see that one pick across from you and you're like, man, this is the one thing I did not want to see. And we talked about this in the past. A lot of trainers that are high level in the earlier rounds will face this weird stuff, like Colin faced Fletchinder at EUIC, I believe, stuff like that, right? And a lot of the best players can kind of weather that storm, so to speak, and come out at the other end and take on the curveballs, but also hit the home runs they're supposed to hit. And I feel like it's gotten a lot harder with the current championship series meta because not only are these picks random and unpredictable, but they're viable, which is something you can't
Yes.
say for a lot of the previous ones.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. Like the spice that you see these days, like a lot of people were like looking at me funny when I brought King Gambit to Worlds, and probably for a good reason. But we saw another King Gambit make, I think, like top 17
Mhm.
in like tied for 17th in Lille, just one win short of top cut. I'm blanking on the name of, is it like Pine Tree? It was like that was a
Oh,
person that brought
yeah.
King Gambit to Lille, and it was actually like so close to top cutting.
You're
Um,
right. It was Pine Tree. They
yes,
they beat Geronizard and Tantan Batus with King Gambit, which is wild. Lost to
exactly.
Chris,
And
beat
I looked at the
Jai.
Tauntaun team.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
looked at the Tauntaun team, and it was essentially 6 times weak to King Gambit. The Tauntaun team was also super spicy because that's just how he team builds, and I do
Yes.
appreciate that. But you can run into a Pokemon such as King Gambit, and especially in a region where, in like Europe, where everybody is trying to bring their own unique spice pick,
Yeah.
there's just so many stumbling blocks, and everybody operates on such a high mechanical level that even if
Hmm.
you have like, even if you can say like, oh, if Patoman plays this person 100 times with mirror teams, Patoman is probably going to win 60 times out of 100.
Sure.
But
Sure.
that's still only 60% at the end of the day. And it's entirely possible that somebody like Pato, who arguably is like was the most successful TPCI region player of last season,
Yeah.
um, it's entirely possible to have two like personally disappointing tournaments back to back. And I will blame it on him bringing Giratina to Lille, and I will sort of blame it on him facing Boom in, I think, his winners round two. It was probably winners round three because he had a bye. But that was just an unfortunate situation where two of our very strongest European trainers had to face very early on because Boom only played his third tournament, and then that just led to a seeding that made him clash with Pato early on. But
Hmm.
yeah, it just happens so easily now that you run into stuff that you may think of as weird in a historical sense, but it's not weird anymore. We just have 60, 70 viable Pokemon,
Yeah,
and you at least
exactly.
have to have an out against the uncommon stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking at Potamin's run in Lille. It looks like he'd lost to Fabio 7-190 in round three, and then won his next match against Huntar 334, but then lost to Aerobubble 66. So again, these are two names that we don't really see that much on in top cuts. Winning tournaments, of course. But Potaman is somebody we always think is got the potential to run the gauntlet. I was looking at some of the other loser side results in Lille, and Emmy Weedle, Dane, RGR, and Tomahawk were four that I kind of zeroed in on. I just want to just look at this real quick because this lines up perfectly with this theme of Tonton Batus losing to a trainer that's not as well known, of Pataman losing to two trainers that are not as well known. Amy Weedle was knocked down in round three to someone named Sephiel, and he lost 0-2. However, Weedle did have a really nice loser side run with 5 wins in a row, including wins over Ripperly, Nickname, and Maxi, as well as a rematch over Sephiel. So Weedle persevered, right? Did really well.
That's
Then you
a
had,
crazy gauntlet, by the way. Like
isn't
nickname
it?
Maxi in Utrecht, that was just the grand finals. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, Maxi was so good at Worlds. Nickname won 2 regionals last season. Ripperly's a stud. I mean, it's such a tough,
yeah,
tough bracket. You look at
Rippley already got a medal this season. Like, that's just crazy.
right? Imagine like losing to someone like Sephiel, who you expect to get the win over probably due to your experience and your skill, and then running through that gauntlet as a result. Tomahawk had something similar happen to him. He was knocked down in losers round three by someone named Smitix. He lost 0-2, but then he won 5 consecutive rounds, including wins over HK Assassin and a Mind Joke, which is wild, right? Quality wins, very quality. Dane was knocked to losers in Group A finals versus A Kushner, which is more understandable. And then RGR was knocked to losers in Group C finals by Cookshack, which obviously Cookshack performed extremely well at that tournament. So the Emi Weedle, the Tomahawk, the Pataman, the Tauntaun, these are these are not like localized occurrences, right? It feels like a lot of these top players are getting upset, and it really questions like what direction is the meta heading? Is everyone getting better? Are these trainers getting older and slower and more geriatric? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, there's like a lot of takes that one can have based on that snapshot. And I know that Tomahawk did a stream the other day that was met with like mixed responses because he was calling out that exact situation. And I think the thesis was, oh, if we have top players struggling to advance, like top players, meaning people that have previously shown that they can consistently top cut, that stops all of a sudden, does that mean that the meta is bad? And what I would say to that is that we shouldn't overvalue a snapshot of one tournament or two, and we also shouldn't generalize from those tournaments that, like, okay, every person that upset a top player did so because of some meta shenanigans. I think that we just have such a density of talent that that can never be said unless we like watch the individual matches and see whether the one player had like a massive team composition advantage over the other.
Agreed.
And also, I will say that if you look beyond Milwaukee and Lille and onto the Gdansk bracket, like what's the top eight in Gdansk looking like? That could just be like the top eight of the leaderboards in Europe in this season or the last. Like okay, we had Colin Six, we
Mm,
had Galaxco Bolton, we had so that's already like how many gold medals? We had
insane.
Alfie, who came second in Frankfurt. We had Stone Collection. I think Stone Collection is currently the top ranked EU player in terms of championship points. Then we had Boom 20, who never placed worse than seventh. and won his very first tournament, came second in his third. Then we had Howie, who is one of the many EU trainers where I was like just waiting for them to get their first medal. I think it is his first medal. I'm not entirely sure, but that is somebody that I frequently encounter in like high leaderboards and like know about their grassroots successes. And then we
Hmm.
had PvP David and Paul Asher. That's also just like two players. Like if Amanda Lundberg gave you her list of the top 5 EU players and those two were featured, you would not ask twice about the legitimacy. So
Exactly.
I feel as if, yeah, like those two tournaments happening on back-to-back weekends, and the one tournament having essentially only names you expect, and the other tournament having like not a single top seed, that still averages out to essentially what you would expect from any given tournament with a mixture of like very established players
Hmm.
and capable players that have like an above average day for their standards. So yeah, I don't believe we have like a greater problem or even development on hand. Um it's just I think we can be lucky that we have both so many viable Pokemon and so many capable players.
If anything, so I think it honestly goes a little bit beyond the players, and I think it actually speaks to the format, and not only the format of the game, but also the format of the tournament. So the word that keeps coming to mind whenever we cover this topic is potency. I keep thinking of when you compare Go to the other titles, you think of probably the most. Not even it's not even an apt comparison because Unite is a team game, but a game in Unite is 10 minutes, right? And it's a best of three, so maximum roughly 30 minutes a gameplay, maybe less. You look at VG, and you're going to average 20 to 30 minutes per round, right? You look at the trading card game, and it's 50 minutes, right? And you look at Pokemon Go, and you're looking at 12 to 15 minutes, maybe maybe less. It depends on how much time it takes to lock in, etc. But of actual gameplay, you're looking at probably 3 minutes per game, right? Nine minutes, 12 minutes, something like that. So I think this is kind of revealing the potency of our games format, where the league does matter so much, the swap matters so much, an individual game matters so much, and it's over so quickly. But also the potency of double elim. So if you had these trainers that were really elite, who lost 2 rounds, who's to say they wouldn't win out the next 6 or 7 rounds if it was a very large tournament and make top cut anyway? So I think that we're kind of like, if you imagine a knife, right? Maybe in the Metacham era we were standing more towards the handle where things are a little more balanced, but now we're kind of marching towards the end of the knife where things are a lot thinner, a lot less balanced, a lot less stable, and at any moment you could just kind of fall off the side if you have an unfavorable set or an unfavorable matchup against your opponent. And I agree with your point. Sometimes we can look at the Pokemon used and we could say, okay, Tauntaun 5 times weak to King Gambit, that's going to be rough, right? And if he is able to come out of that, it's remarkable. But other times, I mean, you might just have that one core breaker, that one misplay that seals it for the whole series because the games and the format is that potent.
Yeah.
So,
Like we've said it time and time again, like we do need Swiss not only I think it's like probably leading to a more quote unquote accurate reflection of player like skill level on the day in any given top cut. But I just feel as if it's just such more it's so valuable just for everybody to be able to compete a little more, because if you walk away from a tournament playing, I don't know, like 7 rounds and going like 4-3 or whatever, like you will not make top cut with that, but you still have like you made new experiences, you
yeah.
probably improved, you got to talk to more people, you got to spend your day being an active part of the competition. And if you just like if you're unlucky, if you go 0-2 and that's your weekend, that just feels bad in comparison. And I'm hopeful that we are moving towards that. The first IC of the season is coming up. I don't know whether that will debut Swiss. The Swiss news that were shared with the players. That was kind of happening at the same time as the IC format was shared. So I don't know. I don't want to read too much into that proximity, but
Mhm.
maybe we'll get to experiment with Swiss eventually. But yeah,
I
for
just
now, I think we should celebrate the variance because in a format that is so lopsided as is double elimination, um, I think having that variance just makes the game seem more accessible, or
mm,
makes success in this game seem more accessible. Because I think we talked about that after Milwaukee as well. If every top cut is the same 60 names, that's not really fun if you're trying to break into that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree completely. It's like when you look at I mean, it's kind of a different example, but if you look at Halo Infinite in its last 2 or 3 competitive seasons, they went from something like 20 tier 1 esports teams down to like 8 or 10. And then you kept seeing, oh, well, here comes Optic Gaming again, or here comes Space Station Gaming, or blah, blah. You see the same teams over and over again. It can definitely feel deflating, right? Because you feel like the top cut or the upper crust of the competitive scene is so far out of reach that it's almost insurmountable. And we talked about this like 2 seasons ago when Dunebug was winning every tournament, or when Potaman wins every tournament. We kind of raised the same question. So I agree. I think opening up the field is better from an outside perspective, because I'm not commentating LAIC. From an outside perspective, I think it's risky to try to run Swiss at one of the biggest tournaments of the season. I think if anything, TPCI would likely start with smaller events first and try to scale it up to the bigger tournaments. But I don't have any inside knowledge. If I would, I would share it with everyone because our loyal listeners deserve it. Um, I think we can move into grand finals. There was a little bit of controversy in this one, uh, and outside of that, the other topic I wanted to touch on was the fact that it felt like Keldeo was only playing with 5 out of his 6 Pokemon for the entire Grand Finals and Grand Finals reset. Marcus pointed out a Pokemon that I was thinking of as well, and I don't know if you feel the same, but it felt like Keldeo had one hand kind of tied behind his back in this Grand Finals.
Yeah, this may be actually a thing that I noted down specifically for this matchup. I don't know. Do we just want to address the elephant in the room, or
Let's do it.
yeah? I think before we do the play-by-play, um, Calio, where was your Corsola? It looked so good. I thought it looked so good. It's such a good neutral response to um, the Empoleon, which really gave him trouble all throughout the grand finals. And I think you do win all even shield scenarios. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong, but I thought initially Empoleon looked a little bit rough into the meta because of Mudslap, which isn't really a thing anymore, but also because of the Corsola matchup being so dire. So I think struggling with Empoleon so much, Corsola was kind of a thing that needed to come out. But to a degree, I see why Caldeo left it on the bench during Grand Finals, because
Mm-hmm.
those two players faced each other in winners finals beforehand, and Caldeo brought the Galarian Kosula twice there, losing the first game and winning the second game without having to use the Galarian Kosula. So you
Mm.
didn't really see the Galarian Kosula do work, and maybe over that, it is easier to forget what it could do in theory. And I don't know, maybe the Zweilous was just really, really scary because it also looks like a reasonable choice into Keldeo's team. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, the Galarian Kostler, I was hoping to see it more, but it did not come out in any of the 6 games of the grand finals.
What's so funny about that is I felt like Hikhami expected it to come. He expected to see it because if you look at the grand finals, he brought Zweilous in the lead in game one. He brought Zweilous again in the lead in game three. You look at the reset, he brought Zweilous in the lead in the first game of the reset. Then you move on to game number two after the rematch. He brought it again, this time in the back. And then in the final game of the grand finals reset, he brought Zweilous again. So he brought it more often than he didn't. And I was cracking up, Swilis. I'm so sorry. I know you saw me laughing, but that is not the Pokemon that Marcus and I saw. That's actually not at all.
Oh,
That's not at all what we
oh,
were thinking.
now I'm really interested because I want to know I want to know what else looks even good on that team. I thought everything else was either being brought or looked pretty dire, but let's hear
No.
it.
No, no. The Pokemon that Marcus and I saw was only brought to 2 games, and I feel like so here's the thing, right? Hikami really had 2 Pokemon that he needed to cover at a high level. He needed to cover the Galarian Corsola, so I agree with you that it was on his mind, and it was definitely a viable pick that probably would have made a bigger impact if Keldeo would have brought it. But the second Pokemon that I felt like Hikami struggled against was Shadow Scizor. And you look at some of the
Oh.
comps here from Hikami, he's playing Zweilous, Galarian Corsola, Empoleon. He's playing Abomasnow with Empoleon and let me see. Yeah, Empoleon, Abomasnow, Zweilous. He's playing Zweilous, Galarian Corsola, Empoleon. These are not okay. So first of all, these are not like soft targets for Scizor, and I know that Scizor has that flimsy issue where it can beat everything on paper, but it doesn't have the stamina to go through more than one Pokemon or maybe one and a half Pokemon at a time. But still, when my opponent is running a dragon and an ice grass type against me on the same trio, I mean, you got to be salivating at the idea of bringing Scizor and just shutting that down. And yes, Hikami had the Shadow Talonflame. He paired the Zweilous and the Shadow Talonflame in game 1 of the Grand Finals reset, I think as an attempt to check both of those core breakers from Keldeo. But still, I felt like Shadow Scizor had immense potential. You could threaten shields on the Gastrodon. You could pressure the Empoleon. You match the pacing with the Night Slash. I mean, there's so much potential there. And I felt like he just stopped playing it, and I don't know why.
I will say that in my notes for the first game of the resets, I did have a little note that says Hikami expects the Shadow Scissor adjustment when he brought the Zweilous lead with Empoleon and Shadow Talonflame in the back,
Yeah.
and then there was no Shadow Scissor on Caldeo's side. But like he did also expect that a little and try to at least bring out the Shadow Talonflame once to like just remind his opponent of the prospect of the hard RPS there. What I will say is why I think like Scissor is perfectly viable and bringable, and probably to a larger degree than Caldeo decided. Um, with the non-Shadow Empoleon, it's very difficult for the Scissor to win that matchup. Like you would
Mm,
essentially need to have a Night Slash boost happen to you, or like it's just like a lot less probable that you get through that Empoleon with the double resisted bullet punches and the one
hmm.
charge attack that you may land on even energy
Agreed.
compared to a Shadow Empoleon. Because with a Shadow Empoleon, you can actually just play the two shield scenario and the Night Slash would knock out.
Hmm.
Whereas it's just like always losing against your opponent's best Pokemon. Plus, there's the possibility of being stuck against a Shadow Talonflame or resisted bullet punches against the Gastrodon. Like there's like at least proper threats and checks to that Pokemon on Hikami's team. So again, like I don't actually disagree with you. I think Scissor should have probably come more often.
Hmm.
But at least it came sometimes. I think the Scissor is probably a relatively good response to the Zweilous,
Hmm.
which was a Pokemon that Hikami leaned into a lot, but yeah, it was also not the most safe pick, I would imagine. Like I could
Yeah.
see Scissor lead. Like I would have liked to see that probably, just because if you're stuck in a negative matchup, you do have the option to safely pivot out. And I guess that's also something that was on Caldeo's mind because he did bring Scissor lead in the very first game of the grand finals. So it is an option, but yeah, the Empoleon, it was really the Empoleon show,
Yeah.
and
It
maybe
was
that
every single
deterred
game.
Caldeo from bringing that as much.
Yeah, exactly. 7 out of 7 total games played, 6 officially. But out of every single game, Empoleon appeared on every single team. I don't know. I just look at some of these matchups and I think, man, if you lead the Scizor into an Abomasnow, you force the swap. If they go Gastrodon, you pull the shield with the Trailblaze immediately. You're at a huge advantage. To your point about the matchups, you are exactly right. It looks like Shadow Scizor versus Empoleon is going to lose pretty hard in even energy, even shields. You need 3 bullet punches. energy lead to beat it in the twos, and in the ones you need 9 turns of advantage, which of course is 5 bullet punches advantage. So it's a tall task, and I agree with you. I think that the Talonflame check is also very, very threatening. So again, we're kind of like armchair quarterbacking this. I wasn't in the grand finals, neither were you this time. So I feel like, yeah, in hindsight, these things seem more obvious, but man, I just feel like in this situation, you have to go on the attack in some way. You have to apply some pressure. And it just felt like Hikhami ran the Empoleon every game and just controlled the tempo and the pacing of the entire matchup. Um, in terms of the adjustments that he made from winners finals, I think you alluded to a couple of those. You made some really good points. I do think that Hikami made some stellar changes and was able to overcome Caldeo in the end. But is there anything else we wanted to mention, or we want to talk about the rematch, or do you think that was
Um,
something we
yeah,
should
I,
just
I
skip?
I have like a little bit. I have a couple of notes on the gameplay here. For example, like the very
Okay.
first game, where it is actually like a winning lead for Keldeo, but um, so Hikami uses his wireless to take a shield from the scissor, the energy from the scissor as well on this wireless. So that's even though it's not nearly as positive as with the Gazlord, where you do have the option to pace to a neutral move in 9 turns, and also have a little more bulk to withstand the bullet punches and two shield scenario, as well as is still able to tank a move just fine, threaten a shield. And what I really liked was the immediate pivot after taking a shield, because
Mm-hmm.
shield advantage Empoleon is essentially unbeatable for any of Caldeo's mons. And
Yes.
Kami recognized that and immediately like you knew that he had the plan going into that matchup. Like he wasn't having like he didn't make a decision on the fly. He already knew what he was going to do. I really appreciate that. Just like confidence executing his plays, and there were like some shenanigans going into the end game where there was a catch attempt, and while that catch attempt failed, and the Zweilis got to another move.
Mm-hmm.
So like a little bit of shenanigans going back and forth, but overall pretty much in control from Hikami, even though there was actually like a Ferret versus Corsola endgame matchup, but because shield advantage Empoleon is kind of broken, just getting a Hydra into that Ferret made it so that even Corsola was able to take that on. What else do we have? Yeah, we can just like walk through the um, various matchups and lines that were being brought. I think the Obama Snow is a really interesting pick into Caldeo's comp specifically, because we did
Yeah.
mention that it's just abysmal against Scizor, obviously, but with its bulk and pacing, it actually hangs really, really well with the Furret, which we otherwise expect to be like this big neutral guy that is very difficult to just beat in the head to head. But what it also did is it walls at least this variation of Florges. Like grass types are really in an interesting spot when it comes to the Florges matchup, because even though it's just like a regular fairy type, it cannot hit back against grass types.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I thought the Abomasnow adjustment is something that maybe threatens other dragons, maybe threatens flying types, but also is a fairy type counter if we expect every fairy type to be Florges. I think that was a pretty good anticipation of what this meta would be. And yeah, seeing the Abomasnow get some action in the grand finals was really fun to see, because that
Mm-hmm.
was another one of those Pokemon that nobody really thought of before going into Lille.
This is such an important mindset as well, because it's not an offensive counter, it's a defensive counter. Like you said, the Trailblaze resisted, the Chilling Waters resisted, Fairy Winds are neutral, but they barely do any damage at all. It's a defensive counter, which I think is such an important distinction to draw here, because you can look at, oh, well, Talonflame is an offensive counter versus something like Abomasnow, or another steel type like a Alolan Sandslash, but it can also be a defensive counter versus something like Earth Power Gastrodon, like it was, even a couple seasons back. So that's such an important way to frame some of the matchups. And I agree with you. I think the
Yeah.
Abomasnow coming out was really cool. Even against the rollout Blastoise, it didn't look awful. Because again, Blastoise can only hit it for the Hydro Cannons or the very costly Skull Bash. So
Yeah.
It was hanging in
It's a
those
bit of a
matchups.
baity matchup on either
Yeah.
side, but it's not terrible. And yeah, it's really fun because typically the ice type is probably the worst defensive typing you can pick. But the Obama had a lot of utility, and also going forward into like a Pokemon such as Unova and Stunfisk would have been so interesting to be brought into the matchup from Keldeo's side, but there's a lot of risk involved if there's not only a Gastron to fear, but also a defensive wall such as the Obama Snow.
Perfectly
Yeah, I
said.
think I think the one controversial aspect of the grand finals, I think, was it the game two of the reset? It may have been the
Correct.
game two of the reset. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Correct.
and that was a rematch call that I think was relatively confusing to the general audience, and I do not know what was discussed on stage. But just from a viewer's perspective, it looked as if Hikami lost count in a matchup, like not throwing Empoleon energy. Was it against the Ufisk? It may have been against the Ufisk, and instead
Hmm.
eating the charge attack that he
Yes.
probably didn't want to take, therefore seemingly losing that match, but getting the redo. And I don't know what the actual rule set says, but even if there was no visual update in terms of a fast attack animation, I don't believe that should be grounds for a rematch. Just because even though like that's an inconsistency and it feels bad, you would still have either the ability to play with sound on, and if you don't have that, you would still see a Thunder Shock do a little bit of damage to the health bar of your Pokemon. So there should always be a way of telling whether a move went through or not.
If you want to see something spicy, you got to go to the YouTube comment section.
Oh God,
The YouTube
do I really want to
comments,
do that?
probably not, but the YouTube comments really laid into the commentators, the judges, even the players, which I found pretty surprising. I remember one comment saying the casters didn't explain anything. I don't know why this was a rematch. I don't know what happened. And from an inside perspective, I'll just say that sometimes the judges' rulings are communicated to us via Discord, but sometimes they're not. So whereas we would like to say exactly what happened as casters, it sometimes it does come down to communication between the judges and production, and sometimes, I mean, the judges also have every right to withhold the reasoning behind their ruling and just kind of say, it is what it is. But I saw one comment that was interesting. Apparently, one viewer thinks that Hikami was challenging that he should have got a 0 turn swap, but instead he got a 1 turn swap, and that's why he
Oh,
wasn't able to charge tag priority tie with the Stunfisk, and the additional Thundershock came through that he wasn't ready for. And apparently that was the basis for
okay.
his discrepancy.
I just saw the live footage, and I know
Hmm.
that chat was confused. And
Yeah,
like the thing is that Hikami did have the move ready before the Stunfisk had the move ready. And I think
true.
that was what made the situation look a little unusual because like at that point you could have just thrown the attack. I guess like then it's like a little bit of a philosophical question whether the optimization is something that should be accounted for to a degree where that can be grounds for a rematch because it
Correct.
just looked like a simple miscount on the front end. Like one thing
Correct.
that I will say is that I do support Hikami challenging that decision and just asking for a judge's review because at the end of the day, it's a very high stakes moment, and as a competitor, you should always exhaust all your options if you feel as if there's grounds for a potential rematch. And even though this like looks a little strange to the untrained eye, me being the untrained eye, I would never blame the player for asking for such a thing.
I think that a lot of people with a strong sense of empathy or even like an underlying shyness in their personality are hesitant to ask for the judge's review because immediately, like, if you actually really think about your personal thought process when you put yourself in that situation, you would say, okay, I want a review. And then for a lot of people, instantly their mind expands and says, oh, but all these people watching will think that I'm a sore loser, or all the people in the venue will be confused and irritated with me, or all of my opponent's fans will be upset, right? And I feel like you have to kind of reel that in and bring things back to a centered place where you are on the stage and just kind of reflect on it as if you and your opponent are the only two players that exist, right? And you're trying to make sure that everything is going correctly. And I hate that our players are in a position where we have to do this, where we have to ask for these things, but maybe one day we won't be, right? But until then, as you said, ZZ, you got every right and and honestly a responsibility to point things out when you don't think that they go correctly, because in a sense you're kind of betraying your own instincts and your own practice and your own understanding of the game when something happens and then you just say, oh well, you gaslight yourself and say, oh well, I was probably wrong, it was probably
Yeah, yeah,
nothing.
yeah. Oh, that's on
You know what I
me.
mean?
Yeah, you shouldn't just like always blame yourself when this game gives a lot of opportunity to just blame its mechanics.
Oh
Um,
yeah, there's plenty of opportunities to blame Niantic, as we love to say. um But if we zoom back out to the overall grand finals, I don't mean for this to sound like it's disparaging of Hikhami in any way, because when you look at the ultimate results, I mean, this was a steamrolling. The adjustments Hikhami made, you pointed it out so well, bringing that Empoleon in every single game and using it as a shield up safe swap in a lot of situations was just so masterfully done. And if you look at Hikami, when he did choose to lead the Empoleon after having it in the back, 5 games in a row, he chose to lead the Empoleon and he catches the frickin' Florges in the lead. Perfect lead call. And he was just reminding Caldeo again that he was basically Thanos. He was inevitable. So even in spite of what you might feel about the rematch call, this was Hikami's day. There was really no way
yeah,
that Caldeo was
yeah.
going to wiggle his way out of this.
I also think that if you go 6-0 in the grand finals, like there's not really much controversy to be derived from one rematch call that may not
No,
have been immediately obvious to everybody. But yeah, that was essentially that. I like that it was an all French final because
me too.
like we do oftentimes just have like, oh, like this is somebody who goes to all the events and places highly everywhere, and now they're the champion of this, now they're the champion of that. And here we essentially had like two, like I don't know how local they are to Lille specifically because that is almost Belgium, but I know that Keldeo only ever competes in the French regional,
Uh-huh.
and like Hikami as one of the most consistent French battlers, but oftentimes somebody who just falls short. Like I know I played him in Utrecht in, I think it was the losers finals, and I was
Mhm.
like, okay, this is going to be difficult. Like we were just chatting, and I was like telling him that I think this is going to be a tough one either way because I consider him a very strong player. And he was like, yeah, like I'm consistent, but I'm consistently losing in the losers finals. So I was like, okay, thanks. This gives me a little hope. And then I later looked at his record because I was like, okay, like this guy is so good in GBL. We play
Yeah.
pretty often, and surely he has a decent amount of top eights, right? And there's some, but he did actually have, I think, 19 17th places. No, not nine. Nine, not
Oh, let's
it's
see,
just nine, not
19.
19, not 19. Nobody has 19 17 places. I got the teen from the 17 already, but
Uh,
it's still like okay, you do feel for somebody who is like obviously top 8 caliber, but then always is one win short of day 2.
yeah.
And having the breakout tournament not only being like straight to the gold medal, but also straight to the gold medal in your own country, I think that's just a really, really cool story. It came with a really, really cool and innovative team. So honestly, I was very happy for Hikami to take that championship. Um, Also because I like when a country within Europe, like there's like not really as much rivalry between countries as there may be between regions.
Mhm.
Um, but like if you think of France on the Play Pokemon stage, you typically just think of Tonton Matus because
Of course.
that's the international champion. That's the person who won a regional championship, who had so many medals, so many strong placements. But there's such a lively and vibrant grassroots scene in France. You see that from the Top Cut, which has players like Gourcuff, who's another player who essentially only plays Lille. There's Wolfpack, who is a French
Hmm.
player who I think is kind of underrated, had a very strong world championships. Um, but I think those players should have their representation beyond just like, okay, there's Tonton and then there's other guys also. Now we have another French regional champion.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's just like it's a story that I think is a little heartwarming overall, and I like it.
Yeah. I agree with you. I did look back at the Utrecht results here. He was playing Shadow Blastoise and Shadow Quagsire into your team, which I'm sure he brought all three games because they looked so good into the team that you had for that matchup. But you did end up winning 2-1. So yeah,
Yeah, it
I'm
was a
proud
close
of
series.
yeah I'm proud of Hikhami. I think he did really well. And winning a regional with Zweilous before these Zweilous could do it. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I'm happy. I think it's a very fun Pokemon. And
Me
I think it
too.
makes a lot of sense because that's another thing. Why do I keep bringing Guzzlord, even though being named Zizwilus? Like, why do I do that? And the answer
Incongruent.
is the answer is that Guzzlord provides much better play into both fairy types with the Sludge Bomb for coverage, and also into Shadow Scizor. Because again, we went over it. You have the Brutal Swing coverage. You have a little bit of extra bulk. So Hikami's team had Talonflame to scare away the Shadow Scizor,
Mhm.
and it had Empoleon as a dedicated fairy type answer. So you didn't really need the extra attack that Guzzlord would have provided. And if you don't need that, then Zweilous is probably the better Dark Dragon, because Dragon Breath is better than Dragon Tail. I know they have the same parameters, but one turn fast moves are always better. Um, Plus, I think like the pacing to Dark Pulse, it's just so nice. It has a lot of very strong neutral matchups.
So here are the two keys, right? You identified supporting Pokemon as being the key for winning with Zweilous. Let me offer some counterpoints. The key for Zweilous beating Scizor is to take a shield off of it, throw two body slams and weaken it, bring in Empoleon, Metal Sound down, sweep, easy GGs. The key for Zweilous beating Florges is to just not line them up against each other. And that's exactly what Hikami did as well. He avoided that matchup at all costs, and that's why he won. So maybe you don't need coverage. You just need to play RPS, ZZ. Come on, consider that.
Well, that is fair. My one streamed win in Gdansk was from leading a Guzzlord into an Azumarill twice
Mm-hmm.
and beating it with Guzzlord twice.
Ah,
So
respect, respect.
it depends on what your team composition requires, I would say.
Something incredible that I just realized. Well, first question for you: there's been one grand finals this season where we had 12 unique Pokemon in the grand finals. Do you remember which one it was?
Belo Horizonte.
Correct, correct. Which is remarkable. That barely ever happens. But in Lille, we actually had 11 unique Pokemon. The only shared pick was Galarian Corsola between the two. So
Even though we do not know whether Keldeo actually had a Galarian course. Okay,
that's true.
I'll let it go. I'll let it go. I'm
It, it
too
ghosted on him
false
when
on
he
my
got to
pearls
grand
on this one.
finals. It ghosted him,
Classic.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I understood that reference.
what's amazing is that we had 11 unique in Lille, and then literally the event immediately afterwards, we had 6 unique. We had identical
Yes.
teams in Europe. What the hell's going
Oh
on in
man.
Europe? But before we get there,
Yeah.
I think we should talk about Australia.
Yes, yes, yes. Let's move on over to Brisbane, which was a 1 day event only. So yeah, wrapping up rather quickly, and it was a streamed event too, thanks to PvP Steve's crew of talented casters and producers,
Mhm.
so that we actually do get to comment on the grand finals, which is a service that we don't have for all the regionals that aren't streamed on the official platform. So very grateful for that. And yeah, we had Gon taking home his very first gold medal at a regional championship, and essentially defeating the one kaiju that always haunts the Australian continent,
Yep.
Pokemonemaker, trying to take that out of region crown, but just falling short in the grand finals.
Exactly. No, Pokemon Maker making it to the grand finals seems like it's par for the course, right? That trainer is just so talented. Shout out to Steve, the whole production crew. I know that Debbie Pebble usually is casting or involved, but I believe she competed this time. But shout out to all the commentators who were a part of it. I had a really fun time watching the stream, and I like the community segments as well. That was really cool. Um, One thing we didn't mention about Lille was the debut of Jay the Underdog. I don't know if we want to like before we fully jump
That
over
is
to
true.
Australia, maybe we should just give him some flowers. I thought Jay did a really good job of building out kind of like the casual casting um, tone and vibe, right? Being very accessible for people that wanted to watch the stream and just
Yes.
kind of have fun. I seriously, like I told you this before we started recording, I felt like I was sitting on the couch next to Jay and he was just kind of like giving us commentary on the games, which is such a unique vibe that he brought to the EU casting team.
Jay is kind of like the funny guy from your friend group, and he's also just so well spoken. So I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed his casting debut. I like what the EU region is doing with their casters this season, where essentially every event they give a new guy a chance. And
Yeah.
I think it was a good vibe overall in Lille, and I would be looking forward to see more of Jay in the future for sure.
Absolutely. The only EU caster that they've tried out that I didn't like was that weird Jonkus guy. He was just I didn't vibe with him at all. Just not good. Just kidding, of course, Jonkus. You're the man. But all right, back over to Brisbane. I was just thinking of the casters, and I really appreciated all their insights. So in terms of the actual meta, the battles, we already mentioned Pokemonemaker. Here's the thing, ZZ. We've seen Pokemonemaker. We've seen Choose. We've seen Yetaruna. We've seen these trainers come from the TPC region over to Australia to compete, but they seem to be multiplying and increasing in numbers every single time. So Yetaruna was registered for this tournament, but actually did not end up competing. Charming Pori was present. They tied for 25th. Charming Pori from South Korea, of course. They lost in round two to They Love Jai. So it took one of Australia's best to take down Charming Pori. We also had Nyan Kake, who was tied for 13th overall. He was defeated by the OCIC fourth place finisher and Agent Magikarp in round four. OCIC 2023. So that was a couple years ago. And then we had some TPC on TPC violence because Nyan Kake was knocked out of the tournament by DHJJ92 from Singapore. Speaking of DHJJ, they actually did pretty well, finishing seventh overall. Knocked to losers in round two by Gone 1001, who obviously went on to win it. And then I want to mention the fifth place finisher, OEU1A, Owela, I guess is how you'd say that. They're from Japan, lost in round four and round seven to Rick Flareon. So Rick Flareon vanquished them from the tournament. An interesting fact here, ZZ, as I wrap up my TPC in Brisbane segment, Moneymaker only battled Australians all the way to the
Oh,
grand finals. Did not come up against anyone from out of region.
I will say that this tournament specifically, I think that proved to me how difficult Australian regionals actually are. Because Charming Pori, Nyan Kake, those two names specifically, I consider among the very
Elite.
best players, period. Not only just like their regions, but you will always see those trainers at the very top of the GBL leaderboards. And for those two players to not even break into the top eight in Brisbane, I think that just goes to show that Australia actually is a fairly competitive region. And you need somebody
Yes.
who is very well adapted to the Australian subcontinent in Pokemon Maker to take home at least a medal.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was like, I think the grand final is actually really worth talking about in this
Let's do
particular
it.
tournament because I thought Pokemon Maker almost had this tournament already. Like he went up 2-0, and then got reverse swept by Gon, even though I would say that Gon probably had a little bit of a team comp disadvantage. So
Hmm.
that makes it even more impressive. Um,
So we'll have the teams up on screen, but I'll glaze through this really, really quick. So Gon, our champion, had Unova Stunfisk, Blastoise, Shadow Scizor, Shadow Talonflame, as well as Pangoro and Galarian Corsola. Meanwhile, Pokemonemaker with Gastrodon, Shadow Annihilate, Shadow Drapion, which we have not seen in eons, as well as Fearow, Cradily, and Galarian Corsola. And you're exactly right. Looking at the record here, Pokemonemaker won the first two games, and then Gon just stormed back. And I think that Pokemon Maker's first two wins were at starting at a disadvantage. He actually led Shadow Annihilate into Galarian Corsola twice and won both of those games.
yeah, that was really impressive. The first game, he decided to safe swap Shadow Drapion, which then got him a shield advantage. And the one thing that was really interesting about the team compositions into each other is how relatively free the Gastrodon on
Mm,
Pokemon Maker's side looked. So after getting that shield advantage, the Gastrodon was able to essentially take the sweep against the rest of Gon's line. Second game is actually really interesting because Pokemon Maker trusts the exact same three, but this time he actually decides to say stop the Gastrodon, maybe pretending to not be running the exact same line.
yeah,
And yeah, so essentially, the Gastrodon is now the safe swap. And I think it gets actually counter swapped by a Blastoise this time,
it
which
does.
I think it's a little curious because that matchup can actually swing either way. And which way it swings depends on the attack stat on your Blastoise. If you have a really high defense, like high bulk Blastoise, like high rank, then the matchup is actually in favor of the Gastrodon because you missed a crucial breakpoint on your rollout fast attack, which makes it so that the Gastrodon is going to be able to prevail. If you run a higher attack Blastoise, you can actually win that matchup, which is a very funky interaction. Overall, it's a fairly neutral matchup, but IVs can actually make a difference in that specific scenario. Um,
Just DM me the
and yeah, I
spreads.
thought I'm gonna. You're
Okay,
like a little bit of the Blastoise guy. You at least have enough plushies to make that claim.
it's true.
Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed the adaptation from Pokemon Maker to just bring the same line but save swap the different thing to maybe throw your opponent off a little bit. And yeah, this time, first game, there was still a Scizor on Gon's team. He did leave that at home for the second game, but the outcome was just the same, with Pokemon
Mhm.
Maker being able to overcome the initial disadvantage. And I must say, I like the team comps on each side. I thought that this was a very um like it wasn't really a predetermined final as much, even though I thought
Agreed.
that just this, judging by the six Pokemon makeup, probably had a slight advantage. But both sides had mons that felt free enough and also unique in a way that, like, we'll talk about Gdansk in a second, but there was very little overlap, which made it like a little bit of like, what do they call it? I don't know. Like it's like if you have like a different style, then it makes for more interesting television at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure.
And and
Hmm.
yeah, oh yeah, one interesting adjustment on the Pokemon Maker side was to bring out the Fearow as a
Yeah.
normal flying type in Game 3 to
Yep.
answer that Corsola. And that appears to be going well, but there was a situation in the end game of Game 3 where Pokemon Maker does have a drill pack loaded against a boosted
Mm,
Scizor on Gon's side, but he doesn't throw it. He keeps pecking, and that is because Gon still had a 1 HP Blastoise in the back. So what Moneymaker probably thought was, okay, he will just attempt the sack swap after I reach the drill pack. So I
yep.
just keep going to peck down the Blastoise before the rollout damage comes through and potentially takes out my low health Fearow. So that was essentially a 50-50 call. If he had just thrown that move right then and there, he would have won the entire tournament. Um, but because of that 50-50 going in Gon's favor, we get to have a game four. This time the Fury is being led into Blastoise, which is less stellar.
Yeah.
Um, Still, one thing that is really interesting in this game is that the Shadow Annihilate on Pokemonemaker's side looks in a position to sweep the end game because there's only a Shadow Scizor and a Pangoro left on Gon's side with all shields still in play. But because Pokemon Maker hasn't seen the Scissor yet, he thinks, oh, maybe there's more damaging charge attacks in the back than a
Uh-huh.
Night Slash from a Panda. He lets the Night Slash go and then just gets bullet punched down. So again, another position where I thought, like I have seen that Gon wins this. How does he win this? And it
Yeah.
is the information game that ends up going in his favor, with his opponent not knowing his third Pokemon just yet, and
Yep.
therefore making a strategic call that ends up backfiring.
He forces the
Um,
hesitation, right?
yeah,
Like he makes you
essentially.
pause, which is yeah, it can overload your system, and that's what happened consistently in games 3 and 4 to Pokemon Maker. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
in my notes here for game three, Galarian Corsola takes the second shield with Power Gem into Firo, and then the next sentence is Shadow Scizor f's up the entire team to win game three. Yeah,
Exactly. And then the last game was essentially just a Galarian Corsola masterclass on Gon's side, where it just saves shields for it, gets a lot of energy with it, manages to even take out a Drapion just because of the shield advantage situation.
hmm
And yeah, it's just like, okay, Corsola, this is all on you. Please carry this game home. And the Corsola does as it's told and
yeah,
secures the gold medal for Gon, which was like, man, this must have been so nerve wracking to live through that in person because
right,
you're already like one decision away from elimination twice, and then you have to execute like such a bold strategy to take home the game five. Yeah,
yeah.
very, very entertaining grand finals, and it's up on the YouTubes. Probably there's also a Twitch VOD, so if anybody wants to rewatch that, it's really worth it. It's a fun series.
It was so poetic too, because in that game number five, the Galarian Corsola from Gone, its final opponent is Drapion, and that's what it needs to beat to win the entire tournament. So probably
Yeah.
the one pick that Pokemon Maker thought was going to be his Drapion answer actually gets folded up by the little piece of coral in the end, which is yeah, again, very very poetic how these kinds of meta themes rhyme as we move through. So yeah, great tournament. Shout out to all of our TPC players that competed. I'm very happy that we had at least a community production for this one. I'd love to see it on the main channel eventually. I don't think there were any other tournaments happening at that time, so maybe we'll get it on the main channel one day, ZZ. But for now, we had a Firo Pangoro Grand Finals in Australia, and Gon holds the line once again to defend the Aussie territory from Pokemon
And
Maker.
I'm not
But
100% certain, but this may have been the first Pangoro Championship. I don't know whether any Pangoro won something since the last time PvP Steve posted one of his graphics where he tallies up the Pokemon who have had the most top cut placements without actually winning a gold. But the last time I saw one, it was like 14 placements for Pangoro leading the pack. Um, if it hasn't happened before, at least now the Pangoro has gotten its gold. So congratulations to the Panda. I think it's still very well positioned in the meta.
yeah,
So yeah, that was a fun one to see.
I'm furiously searching through this as fast as I can. 2025, no other Pangoro. 2024, no other Pangoro. 2023, I don't think Pangoro is even on anyone's radar.
Pangoro wasn't invented yet.
Yeah, no, he's the first. Gon is the first to win gold with
Let's
Pangoro.
go.
I think that's also
That's
something that this is like a side
yeah.
tangent, but I wish we
Yeah.
had more of like an ESPN analytics thing. Like,
Yeah.
whatever quarterback, Josh Allen throws for an average of 320 yards on a Friday night when it's a full moon and below 50 degrees. Stuff like that. I would just like to know, like, who's the
I'm a
first
sucker for
Pangoro?
statistics. I really
Yeah,
enjoy that type of stuff.
exactly. Like, who's the first Pangoro champion in history? I feel like that should be played up a bit more because that would give players like more oomph, more push
Yeah.
behind playing these innovative Pokemon.
And I think it's such a fun signature Pokemon as well. Like, if you were like the first Lickitung champion, it's probably not as impressive.
Yeah. Like the Homer Simpson at the bar meme where everyone else has like a tongue on their face. That's what I envision when I think of that. But yeah, outside of that, I don't think there's a whole lot else we can say about Brisbane. I'm just happy we got a tournament. We had a few Galarian Moltres there. We had another Pangoro on JJ's team from Singapore. We had a Zweilous on one of our Japanese trainers' teams. And yeah, outside of that, very fun. It's good to see Jumothy performing well. I faced him at NAIC. He beat me in our rematch. So whenever I see him winning, I'm like, yeah, that was a quality loss. If I'm going to lose to anyone, I'm glad that they're a talented player, right? So keep on pushing, Jumothy. You're the man. But I think it's time we move on to Gdansk because we're already an hour and 25 minutes in.
Yes, let's do it. It was a little smaller than Lille. We had 95 competitors attending this event, but honestly, I will say this before we get into any of the competitive action.
Sure.
Gdansk is probably the best city to visit during the European competitive season. It is so pretty. Um, and even though like the numbers don't show it, we had a bunch of American visitors over, which was essentially just friends of mine, and we generally had the best time. It's such a gorgeous place, and even though it's like not terribly central in terms of where most European competitors sit, I think Lille is much more easy to reach. For example, the like by train from London, that is
Sure.
very easy, whereas you do need to fly out to Gdansk.
Pretty far
But
east.
we had fantastic food. The city is absolutely gorgeous. In terms of value for money, it's just about unbeatable. And yeah, like if Gdansk keeps being reiterated as the Polish location for the championship series, they can be sure to welcome me again next season. Even though my personal competitive experience was so for this particular regional.
Well, it causes me pain that you confirm that Gdansk is just that beautiful, and the reason is because my on my dad's side we do have Polish ancestry, and I would love to go visit Poland at some point in my life. Never been, but not only are you saying it was lovely, but also the illustrious Amanda Lundberg was telling me about how wonderful her hotel was, about how incredible the city was, about how great of a time they were having, and was just bragging constantly about how awesome the tournament was. Because I've told her before the same thing I just told you about Poland and traveling to Europe and maybe one day casting EU regional, fingers crossed, if they let me in. But I kept telling her, yeah, if I was going to go anywhere, it would probably be Poland first. And for this to just be even better than I expected, it makes me think, what if I could have been at the event. But anyway, that was the good
Well,
side.
there's always the 2027 season, so
That's true. That's true. So hopefully we get Poland and we get Gdansk in particular because I'd love to go. I'd love to see it. Um, in terms of meta, why don't we do an overview of the meta and then we'll get a little bit more zeroed in into gameplay. So a couple of shout outs I wanted to make here. We did see Greninja kind of resurface a bit. We saw it on both Galaxica Bolton and Tomahawk's team. We did see a Feraligatr make it onto Bar the Gamers team. Shadow Malamar, who I don't know who thought of Malamar since the Mega debut, but apparently Tunantel 2 was going to play it. We also had a Best Buddy Hondo Shiny Citadel on Mixon's team. I mean, EU is such a treat, man. And then we had Shadow
I
Gary on Paula and Stone's team as well.
really love the Citadel because like Mixon was on stream at least twice. He brought it so many times. It had like half a target on the opponent's team. He just wanted to show off that Citadel, and I appreciate the commitment to the bit because it is such a fun Pokemon to see doing well in a tournament like that, and to actually give it some screen time. Like I do appreciate that a lot. And yeah,
Me
top
too.
16s. I don't know whether anybody will be able to repeat that feat. with a Citadel, but yeah, it did go far.
Yeah.
I wish my Toucanon did more. My Toucanon tried its best, but unfortunately, the one time I brought it out, it was met with a Shadow Scissor, which I was fine with because it's a soft loss in the one shield scenario, and then
But
I probably could have Dragon Tailed down with my Guzzlord. But it's not as soft if the Scissor boosts on the first Night Slash, and that's where everything fell apart in that matchup. So yeah,
yeah.
I will say that Toucanon, fantastic meta call 3 weeks ago. Not anymore. Like with the
Yeah.
ascent of Unova and Stunfisk, there's just like the Mudsteppers disappear,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, like a spammy Pokemon that actually has coverage and fast move pressure into Toucanon appears.
Yep.
I probably did better than ever before in practice tournaments with the Toucanon team, but that was mostly against people that were running Corsola, Mudsteppers,
Mm,
Clodsire, Credilli, like a lot of Pokemon that get outpaced, don't have any immediate damage, and maybe even have like a negative type matchup.
yeah.
And as the normal flyer with the highest attack stat, like not necessarily stat, but after the 20% damage boost calculation from the shadow, it is the highest damage drill pack from a normal flyer. And that is actually very valuable in the right circumstances. Gdansk, not the right circumstances. But it is on the graphic. Somebody at Draco's had to search for that Toucanon sprite and put it on there, tied for 13th. We do take those.
We do. We absolutely do. No, that's such an incredible Pokemon. And it was funny. I don't think I told you this, but I think it was during the Brisbane stream. I believe it was Fishy Legs actually said that Toucannon might be a player in Gdansk and
was it
alluded to it.
was it like Mikey Morks who had it on his casters prediction? Because I know that I talked with Mikey Morks ahead of Brisbane about the
Yeah.
Toucanon. I think we may have faced in a practice. So yeah, like the Toucanon propaganda spread a little bit, but
It's
yeah,
sweeping the nation. It's sweeping the world.
it was more of a thing to draw eyeballs. It could have been like a legit player 3 weeks ago, but
Sure.
yeah, unfortunately, it just about missed the timing with that thing.
Well, something I wanted to talk about was the top 12 usage percentages going into Gdansk. I think that Pokemon tweeted about this and said there's a new sheriff in town and its name is Furret. So we had Furret clocking in, I guess, at 58%. We had Altaria at 50%, Corviknight at 50%, Cradily at 50%, followed shortly after by Stunfisk, Clodsire, as well as Florges. We had Scizor at 33%, Galarian Corsola tumbling from its throne all the way down to 25%. Fortress showing a spike of life at 17%, followed by Shadow Gyarados and Greninja. ZZ, this is a wild top 12 usage, and it's a complete reshuffling from what we saw just a few weeks ago.
Yes. I think the thing that stands out to me the most is actually the downfall of Galarian Corsola.
Yes.
Because if you look at the top 8 in Gdansk, you only have two ghost types and only one Galarian Corsola. You also have the Jellicent on Alfie's team. Oh no, there's more. There's the Dusknoir and Howie's actually. It's just not in the ghost slot on the Dracovish graphic. But
Yeah.
the point being that with the amount of Furret making their way into the meta, like six Furrets in the top 8, bringing Galarian Corsola goes from being the safest thing that you can do to the least safe thing that you can do.
Yeah. Agreed.
And even though you do have a lot of great neutral matchups, if there's just this polarizing threat that is very, very like difficult to punish in its own right, like Furret is a very spammable Pokemon. It's not really any fighters to write about. Like you can look at the entire top cut, like the entire top 16 of Gdansk, and like the Pangoros didn't really translate much beyond Bar the Gamer's team.
Yeah.
Then there was Tomahawk with a Shadow Annihilate, but overall, not really the most threatening environment for it.
Mhm.
So yeah, bringing Galarian Kostler became a liability overnight, and in its place, a whole new top meta team, like top meta cores emerged. And yeah, having an entirety of 6 unique species in grand finals was probably, I think that is probably going to inform the meta going forward, going into Vegas and eventually Stuttgart a lot.
It's just this combination, and you pointed this out earlier. This combination of your flying types with, or excuse me, with your steel types with that Unova Stunfisk. I find that so interesting because previously you could look at having a team like Scizor and Corviknight. You could look at having those two Pokemon exist together on the same team, and you would say, "Oh, Talonflame. I'm just going to hammer them with Talonflame, and it's going to be an easy win." But then you throw in the Unova Stunfisk, you throw in Altaria and its neutral matchups, or even the Chilling Water from Florges. The Even Shield matchups are not so good for Florges versus Talon. However, the Chilling Water does hurt it a lot, and it sets up a lot of other play. And I just feel like I don't know. This is not the metamorphosis that I was predicting at all. If just to put it shortly, and honestly, I don't know, ZZ. I'm looking at this, man. I'm looking at Scizor losing to Bastion. I'm looking at Altaria losing to Bastion. I'm looking at Florges only winning the twos. I'm looking at Furret losing to Bastion. I'm just thinking, man, I really think there's still a place for this Pokemon, and if not for this secretive robe-clad truce that all the Europeans made, there would be more Bastion.
There could be. I still feel as if like between Corviknight, between Van Stunfisk, between having that utility with the chilling water, and honestly, like Scissor and the Furret being able to at least make that close,
Yeah.
it's not as if Bastiodon has more clear targets other than Altaria. So if there were like 3 or 4 unwinnable matchups into Bastiodon, I'd probably be inclined to recommend that Pokemon to the next European would-be champion. But as of now, I think there's a use case for Bastiodon. There is a good argument to be made for it. I also don't think it just plays itself into European teams. I know there's like a degree of vulnerability, but you always play that game of, oh, do I align it against the ground type? Do I not? Um, Especially with the ground types trending more towards being like coverage oriented ground types,
Yes.
whereas previously you just had the Mudslippers who were about the neutral matchups and the raw damage that they could dish out. I think between Clodsire and Van Stunfisk, it's a lot more difficult to form proper cores around Bastiodon that can't be exploited. So I
Yeah.
see why it's absent. And I also feel as if the top 2 trainers in PvP David or Gdansk Regional Champion and Boom 20, the most crazily consistent kid that we have on the circuit, um, I think this was a triumph of weirdly neutral play because while Unova Stunfisk can be an RPS driver in certain conditions, I don't believe it was that now. And even
Hmm.
matchups between Pokemon like Florges and Altaria are actually a lot less polarizing than you would expect just looking at the typings. Because there's like so many interesting sims between the Pokemon on the winning team
Hmm.
where Altaria does take the 0 and 1 shield matchup against the Florges if the Florges runs Chilling Water and Trailblaze. We did see Paulasha, who came 5th in Gdansk, actually experiment with Disarming Voice for a more solid
Mm.
matchup into opposing Altaria over the Trailblaze, which was covered by grass coverage on her Furret and her Credilli, as well as a pretty good anti-ground pick in the Shadow Gyarados on her team. So Trailblaze wasn't really needed, and instead there was a little more insurance against Altaria. But if you don't have that extra insurance through the Disarming Voice, that's just a neutral matchup all of a sudden, even though it's a fairy into a dragon type. And
Hmm.
similarly, the Unova Stunfisk into Altaria matchup is also very interesting in that going by the Sims, Unova Stunfisk does win that matchup fairly handily and is even able to take it down a shield, um, unless you opt for a higher attack Altaria. Because there
Mm.
is a Dragon Breath breakpoint, and as we know about breakpoints, those occur if your Pokemon reaches a certain attack stat that then makes it so your fast attack does more damage into that Pokemon every time that fast attack is launched. And that is most impactful with a one turn fast attack, such as Dragon Breath.
True.
So on Altaria, this could actually be a tech that would then enable you to take home the zeros and two shield matchup against opposing Unova and Stunfisk while sacrificing a significant amount of bulk. So it would be a trade off, but a lot of these Pokemon have matchups that are easily flipped depending on shielding or IV scenarios. So it was very fascinating to watch these two top players interact and play around with exactly the same set of very neutral Pokemon into one another. Like they don't always have to be neutral, but into the mirror, it's pretty
Hmm.
neutral overall.
So I looked at the Sims. Your Altaria needs a attack stat of 108.29 in order to get three Dragon Breaths instead of just two versus the Stunfisk. And the best IV combination for that is 1170. And I was so disappointed because I was looking back through my Altaria I got from the community day. PvPoke listed a attack weighted Altaria. And I was like, wait, is it the same one? Is it the same spread? It is not. The one that
Oh.
PvPoke mention is like a 13, 11, 2, it looks like. So I actually need to go and catch more Swablu, I guess, in order to get that one. That's so fascinating. I feel like there's so much, I don't want to call it gatekeeping, but there's so much hidden information when it comes to break and bulk points that top trainers just refuse to give to anyone else. And I understand completely because that is your competitive advantage, right? But it's like, man, I wish that
It's
I knew this stuff.
I do like sharing some of these insights on the podcast if I'm aware of them, because honestly, I think just knowing about such little break and bulk points, it can inspire people to just go on PvPoke and look for such scenarios on their own and maybe find their unique spreads. Like you may have a Pokemon sitting in your storage that does a bunch of unique things into certain key matchups, and I don't know. This is certainly on the nerdier end of being a competitor, but I personally really enjoy finding the optimized spread. And yeah, like
Yeah.
there's like I know Annihilate was a big one where like if you have this attack stat, you actually beat Clodsire even though it
Oh
resists
yeah,
all your counters back in
I
the day.
remember.
Very infamously, the Medi Slayer Medi, the Medicham that Axon used to win the World Championships back in the day. Um, so yeah, there's a bunch of little side quests that you can um, you can pick for yourself if you are interested in running anything but the rank one, which is like a good rank is typically more reliable, but if you have certain weaknesses that you need to patch up on your team, maybe it's worth looking into some more crazy spreads and scenarios.
Yeah, it's really weird because I'm plugging that IV spread into PV Poke, and it's actually not giving me the breakpoint against the Stunfisk when I sim it out individually, which is weird. So maybe it's not the 108. Maybe I'm incorrect there, but I feel like I mean that's what PV Poke said. So I'm a little bit surprised. I'll just put it 1200 and see what that gives us. Are we hitting 3 Dragon Breath damage? Yes, we are there. And that does, I guess, make the matchup closer. I don't know. I'll have to do some more research, but I'm really surprised because I plugged that in. I tried to do was look at the high rank Altaria versus this 1170 and see what you picked up and what you lost. But in both settings, it's showing that it's a loss to Stunfisk when it's a rank one Stunfisk. So I don't know. More research is needed. Maybe I need to double down on that. I'm really happy that you explained the nuances of the matchups between the Florges and the Stunfisk and the Altaria and all that kind of thing. Because even though these teams were identical, I even heard a rumor that both David and Boom had the same IV Furret on their team as well. Which I don't know if there's a
they,
Furret
they
tech.
did have they did have a scenario. I think it was in the winners finals where I like both of them won CMP in the mirror once. So that was where it was revealed that it was the exact same attack stat.
Oh my gosh,
Because
yeah,
if it's identical, then it's
it's a
just a
coin
coin flip
flip.
who wins CMP.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but even though these teams were identical, and this was very much a new look to team comps and into the meta, the games between the two of them felt incredibly fluid, incredibly dynamic, very back and forth. It wasn't like, oh, you're going to see an obvious team comp advantage from one side or the other. It was really fun to watch, actually, and I was like, you know what? If this is the new neutral meta, then I don't mind it that much. It actually looks pretty entertaining. It's just very different than anything we've had before, which I think is what stood
Yeah.
out to me.
I think that's also really fun because having this as now the established meta, we just earlier today got a little glimpse into what people are running in practice through the Candle Cult update, where Inadequance hosts a bunch of practice tournaments each week or has people host it. It's a bunch of community contributors taking on the hosting duties, and we do appreciate them a lot for it. Um, and plenty of winning teams from last week's practice followed the exact formula that Boom and PvP David employed in their grand
Mhm.
finals, where essentially there's two steel types. It's not always the Corviknight in practice, actually. Some people have diverged from that and instead opted to bring Empoleon, which also looks like a very neutral Pokemon in this current meta. And then there's the Altaria, the Unova Stunfisk, and
Yep.
there's the Furret, there's the Florges, or maybe even a different fairy type than the Florges, like a Wigglytuff is what I've seen, because
Hmm.
that is actually like, I think it wins the head to head against Florges, at least in some scenarios. So people are experimenting with stuff. Oh, it certainly has a better Altaria matchup as a Charmer, where the main
Of
source of
course.
damage is the fast attack. So a lot of people just adopting that formula, but like changing bits and pieces around to maybe have the edge in a potential mirror formula match. So yeah, we could go into the grand finals, highlight some of the plays. There were like even really great plays in the winners finals already. I think I remember PvP David in game five of the winners finals, just like really heads up play where he hard swaps his Unovan Stunfisk ahead of the final matchup because he already anticipates that there would be another Unovan Stunfisk in the back, and because of that one Thundershock worth of advantage, he would be able to outpace. And there's like a lot of like split
Mm.
second decisions where each trainer tried to gain that little bit of advantage. And I think it was being said during the grand finals as well, this is a young people's game now. These like point 0.5 seconds decisions, we
Yeah.
may eventually age out of being able to execute that, but it is fascinating to watch.
I mean
I don't know, Speedy.
that's sorry. That's what King was saying like 3 years ago. King was saying this is a young person's game, and then you had I know exactly what you're referencing. Inadequance was casting, and he turned to his co-caster and said, "Old people like us couldn't do this, but these young trainers have the reflexes and they can pull it off."
It was very tongue in cheek by my time because he is the Frankfurt regional
I know
champion
he
just a
just
couple of weeks ago. He can't have aged that much in that short amount of time.
it almost
Um,
you know what, it almost reminds me of athletes in other sports, right? If you look at something like tennis, for example, if you've got a young tennis player, they might be running from one side of the court to the other, really hitting these hard angle shots, trying to throw their opponent off balance. And then as that player gets older, maybe they work more finesse. Maybe they're taking fewer average steps on the court, but they're better at ball placement, right? Maybe they're doing some things that are different, and it adjusts with their age and play style. I'm not trying to liken competitive Pokemon Go on a mobile phone to the Wimbledon, right? I'm not trying to draw a direct correlation, but I do think that if you were to pick up, if Martine was to pick up PvP David's team with one turn fast attack Corviknight, one turn fast attack Altaria, nothing shorter than a two-turn fast move there, and try to win battles when he's so adept at playing Charm, Wigglytuff, Mud Slap user, two-turn Shadow Claw,
yeah,
whatever.
like going for the alignment strategies is the true old man's game that exists in Pokemon Go.
but
But
but that's yeah. I mean, that's basically what I'm getting at with his team. Yeah, he had a Blastoise as well. I mean, these are like dinosaur speed Pokemon compared to what David and Boom were playing, right? So if you would give Inadequance this team, and if you were to give David Inadequance's team, the results would be wildly different. So you definitely need to embrace, whether it's RPS or whether it's finesse, you got to
I will say
embrace.
that I will say like this is obviously all in good fun, but we
Yeah.
did see Martine in Frankfurt like execute plays where he did not get caught on because he waited for like that split second, seeing the Pokemon come in, reacting accordingly. So he's still got it. He's not that old
Yeah.
just yet. He gets a lot of beauty sleep. He's going to be fine.
Well, here's the difference, right? Martine was picking his moments. He knew exactly what to anticipate, and he only made a risky play when it was very calculated, right? Whereas when you look at Boom and David, I mean, they're just sometimes I feel like they were switching for the heck of it, just to move the pieces around, just to respond quickly, just to pounce on whatever the next matchup was. And
That was an insane play. I think that was who did that.
the cap tie, game three,
That was like a situation. Yeah, yeah. Boom was the one um, who did that. I think where, or was it David? I don't actually know who took game three. Whoever won that did like one Dragon Breath with an Altaria, then one turn to swap, and then yeah, I think it was Boom, and
it
then
was.
CMP'd the Unova Stunfisk. So because of that one Dragon Breath, you would essentially guarantee that your opponent would trigger a whole nother two-turn fast attack, and you
Yes.
could get to your attack and then charge attack priority tie, which is such a high level play. Like it's not just like any old combo play. Oh, I just blindly tap my Pokemon. I have to keep the move counts. I have to like it's a game of mathematics in a way where you always need to know how do the fast moves align, which actions will my opponent perform, and at some point it gets nearly impossible to outpredict that if it's so well executed. Same way Boom did in Game Three of the Grand Finals.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So when just to draw one more comparison between Inadequance and Boom, when Inadequance famously cap tied with his Giratina Origin form on Chargebug, that was a clear cut situation because that was the only reserve Pokemon, if I remember correctly, the only reserve Pokemon left, and he was able to swap it in, cap tie, throw the move, and then take the energy. In this situation with Boom, he knew that no matter what David had on the other side, Scizor was going to win that charge attack priority. So it's almost like having a checkmate play in your back pocket. And by aligning the turn durations that way, no matter what your opponent tries to do, if you know that they're going to trigger a fast attack, that takes 2 turns, you swap in, and then on that turn number 3, you're going to lock in the cap tie. No matter what, you get your move first. And if you look at the actual CMP ladder on PV Poke, I mean, Scizor is up there really, really high. It's 5th place overall. The only Pokemon that are likely to win a cap tie against Scizor are Greninja, Primate, Morpeko, and Murkrow. Only 4. So if you put yourself in that position where you have the move and you can fine tune that catch, you're going to get off your Night Slash every single time. Yeah, that was game 3. Boom was able to win. I think in the intro I said that David did a reverse sweep. David actually won game number 1. Boom won game 2 and 3, and then David came back to win 4 and 5. So, but yeah, that was impressive. Let me see. I'm looking up my other notes here. Game 4, Scizor was the key for David. David insta swaps into Furret. This was game 5. So David leads Altaria into Scizor. Obviously, not a great place to be, especially even shields, even energy. David insta swaps into Furret. David realizes once he weakens the Florges that his Altaria can sweep the game. David Thundershocks down the Florges, which was a huge moment. Our casters were popping off, and then throws double Mud Bomb into Furret to win the game. And I think that Boom was like 1 Sucker Punch off of the Trailblaze, or 2, perhaps. So it was still a very competitive game. But David did have the buffer that he was in the winner side bracket. So even if Boom
Yeah,
did win that game 5, it would have gone to the reset.
yeah. And yeah, like just that thunder shock down, like it's not
Yeah.
really something that you see a lot of the time, but it goes to show that even though Florges sometimes can feel really bulky thanks to the chilling water debuffs, it only has like a little less than 1900 stat product, which is very middling
Yeah,
in the grand scheme of things. So even a Pokemon such as Unova and Stunfisk can actually put in some work against it still, which again speaks to the neutrality of the entire composition into one another. And like one thing that I thought was most fascinating is that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody ever brought Corviknight, right? Was that how it played out?
correct.
Um,
No Corbinite on either side.
yeah, so I see why in like grassroots practice, a couple of people are already replacing that Corviknight, which may have been very solid into other team compositions, but not really into the mirror. And I think part of that is because the rise of Altaria is actually making it very difficult to bring. Altaria appears to be so flexible in this current meta because not only is it a pretty good damage sponge, actually clocking in at, I don't know, like 2100 ish. Like a lot
Mm,
of stat product is available on that Pokemon,
22.
and therefore, oh yeah, perfect. It's going to be able to tank so many neutral hits. It's going to be able to pace to charge attacks much faster, and it feels like it has gone from a fairly RPS Pokemon all the way back in the day, where like you had a 1 minute switch clock, you had a Zoomerl everywhere, and then you had an Altaria which had a more damage oriented Dragon Breath that couldn't really do much against the Fairy type answer. Um, Now you have a Pokemon that still has the exact same stats and type profile, but you have coverage against steals with
Yes.
Flamethrower. You have stronger energy generation. You have a different switch clock, and all of a sudden, Altaria becomes one of those things that can just be moved in and out of battle, like a a big cloud in the sky. Just like it moves slowly, but
Yeah.
it can rain down on whatever target at any time if it just dips in and out with energy. And
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot more Altaria in Las Vegas as well, because I think this was the perfect proof of concept for this Pokemon specifically.
Hmm.
And I did really enjoy how both players in the grand finals utilized it, because again, it's one turn duration fast attack as well, which makes it just so maneuverable and really lends itself well to neutral play.
It almost felt like fighting a cloud as well. Like you're trying to reach up and you're trying to, you know, deal some damage. You're swiping at it with for its sucker punches or with
Yeah.
Florges,
That's
but it's
another
just so
thing
hard to
about
deal damage.
Altaria, right? Like
Yeah.
where Furret is actually pretty aggressive into a lot of middling bulk Pokemon, where Stab Swift actually puts in some work. But against Altaria, you can't boost up your damage with Trailblazers,
Mm,
and Swift only does so much against a Pokemon with such a good defensive profile. So
true.
as just like a neutral check for Pokemon that are otherwise difficult to deal with, I think Altaria has a lot of utility, and it will have a little bit of a target on its back though. So I do wonder how people intend to target that. And I guess like different fairy types or a different tech on Florges could be a way, but it's like we talked briefly about ice types earlier, and I do wonder whether between Unova Stunfisk and Altaria, there may be a resurgence of ice types down the line.
Hmm. And Clodsire and Cradilly. There's a few targets. I'll say there's a few targets for sure. Yeah, or I don't know. Maybe Meteor Folly makes an appearance and just smacks down all the Altarias single handedly with
Oh no!
Bastion.
Yeah, imagine like we talk about all these new Pokemon entering the meta, and we go to Vegas, and it's just the third Bastion in a row in a regional. Oh
Oh no, what fresh hell is this?
no!
No, one thing I did want to point out, and you and I can discuss this maybe not on the show, but I thought that Colin actually had a really nice run in Gdansk, finishing third overall. I have in my notes here that Colin. Let me see. Yeah. So Colin eliminated Bar the Gamer. Colin lost to Howie in Group C semifinals. However, after his loss, Colin would go on to win three more rounds to make it to day number two. Colin would win his rematch versus Howie in losers round three as well. So Colin had a very deep run, a very solid tournament. There was a bit of a stumble early on, which sent him down to that loser side bracket, but very, very good showing from him. I know a lot of people, when they think of EU, they think of Pato, they think of Paula, they think of you, they think of Tauntaun. But seeing someone like Colin have a third place finish, I think it shows he's still firmly in the race, so to speak, and doing well for himself.
Yeah, I think like the name the final boss, like that's not a coincidence. Like people still refer to him as that, and even though he's like he's not been as consistent about his grand finals appearances as he used to be in like the season where he dominated everything, um, he's still like he always feels more likely to make a top eight than to miss out on it. I don't know whether the stats back that up, but if they may not, that really doesn't matter because um, I think this kind of snowballs into a general point that I want to make
Mm-hmm.
about the competition, not only in Europe, but also beyond that, where I did see a post from Paulasha actually, who is like a little bit in the same boat as Colin, as like a multi-time European champion and certainly one who is one of the undisputed greats of the game. Where she noted after Gdansk that she wants to take competing a little bit slower because it's
Mm-hmm.
relative, like it's fairly anxiety inducing, and one always has to maintain a healthy balance between the pressure that one puts on oneself. And I think that was a post that like spoke to me personally, but also is something that I do want to briefly touch on just in a general sense
Sure.
because we have so many players like Colin who have just reached the highest of heights, and that does, even if you don't intend for that to be the case, it does set up expectations to match those achievements again in the future because that's just the bar that you set, right? And
Yeah.
everybody like just naturally strives to improve, and eventually it will become difficult if you're already that high up. How do I improve further? And I do want to just like generally leave every competitor that may be listening to this with the message that if you're like new and hungry and you feel like, oh, I do want to prove myself and that is something that fuels me positively, go for it. If you're somebody who has reached certain achievements and now feels as if they kind of have to chase that again just to prove that they still got it, people outside of your own self perception will always see you as like a bigger star than you perceive yourself as. That's usually the case. There's certainly people who just have a lot of confidence and never really face that pressure, but I think it's
Mm-hmm.
natural for competitors to reflect on their achievements, reflect on the runs that went well, and reflect on the runs that maybe didn't go so well. And what I just know as somebody who is a competitor myself, who has to deal with feelings like that myself, but who also talks to a lot of competitors, is that there's so much respect and admiration, especially for players who have resumes like Colin or like Paul Asher, um, that I really do hope that those people can always enter a competition with a feeling of, okay, this is going to be fun and it won't matter as much how well I do because the perception of the people out there will not be altered. It will not change my life to the negative in any significant way if I don't perform the way I like at the end of the day want to perform, but know that I can't always. And I don't know. I think the main takeaway here is just that this community is so appreciative of one another that even if we talk about somebody's greatest successes in the past tense,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that they count any less than back then in the moment. Is probably what I want to say.
Yeah.
And I thought this was like an opportunity to segue into that because I did read that Palasha post and it moved me to a degree because it is a feeling that I have experienced as somebody who has won a tournament before, but that's more than 2 years ago. So I don't know. I think as long as you keep having fun while putting yourself out there, everything's all right. And if that ever is not the case, I think this community will have your back.
Well, Silph Worlds was 5 years ago, and I'm still riding that one's easy. So you gotta you gotta ride the wave as long as you can, right? No, but in all seriousness, I agree with you, and I think maybe it's just the circle that we're in and what our social feeds are filled with. But I think I'm seeing more of those sentiments lately, like an increased kind of vibe that competing is wearing on people. Um, and I think it's definitely hard when you have such high expectations. It's not just EU, it's not just NA. I really love to talk with Hard Jeff from time to time, and what I've noticed in our conversations, because I'll message him, I'll ask, hey, can you give me the team comps that we saw in grand finals? Because he's usually in grand finals, and even if he didn't win that grand finals, he shares with me the teams, and it informs our show so much. It's so constructive. It gives us an insight into these tournaments that should be streamed but are not yet covered. And we're so grateful to him for that. But in my conversations with him, I'll say things like, "Oh yeah, well, congrats on another grand finals." And the sentiment I get in return is, "Thanks, but I feel like I had a chance to win and I messed up, or I feel like I really wanted it to be me to actually win." And for someone like Harjeff or like Paula, who's had that trophy on the stage, once you're kind of like once your peak is that level, it feels like anything less than that can be kind of like a failure, right? And especially if you have a few tournaments that don't go so well, it can start to feel like maybe you've lost your way, which I think is a valid concern, right? Because the game does move so fast, the meta changes so often, and there's so many variables that are outside your control. So I appreciate that you said that. I feel like you have such a handle on the situation, and you have a very empathetic um, way of talking about it that I think a lot of people would really value. They might look at me and say, "Oh, well, that was Sylph Grassroots 5 years ago. That's not that big of a deal." But when they look at you, they know for sure that you are with them, right? You're standing side by side. So I think that's really important to say and to clarify. And you know what, guys? It's okay to take a little bit of time off and to come back refreshed. Wolfie, he got burned out a year or two ago. He took like 3 or 4 plus months away from the game, came back, won a tournament. Sometimes you need to recharge and you can't just run on fumes consistently, because that's how you really hit the burnout that pushes you so far into the negative that maybe you don't ever come back. So that's something you need to know yourself and be aware of, and not not beat yourself up, because like
Yeah.
you were saying, the people outside will always value your accomplishments and hold weight whenever your name is mentioned, but we know that competitors are the hardest on themselves out of anyone else in
Yes,
the room.
yes, yes.
So
Everybody does tend to be the hardest critic of themselves. So
it's the internal voice. You can't let that sneak up on you. In terms of Gdansk, I'm glad it was beautiful. I'm glad that I missed out on an incredible tournament yet again because I was not in EU. But no, in all seriousness, I'm happy everyone had fun. A couple other things we could probably mention. We had another casting debut. We just had Jay in Lille, and now we get Jocks in Gdansk. And
so we had Jonkus, Jay, and Jonks.
oh, Jocks, it's triple J's, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wonder who
Wow.
the next J person is going to be.
Well, I heard it was Jay's Wireless is who I heard it was. No, I'm just kidding. That would require a name change. I don't know if that's approved
That is very
brand testing.
unlikely to happen this season, but maybe in the future. Maybe in the future.
Maybe. But yeah, what'd you think of Jock's debut? I thought he brought the energy for sure.
That is very true. So I personally consider Jox a good friend. So I know that he worked really, really hard for this opportunity. He did a lot for the grassroots circuit in Portugal as well. And I will say that I did enjoy how he did get to cast a tournament where with Tunante we had another Portuguese player have a little bit of a breakout
Mm,
moment. I know that that was also a competitor who really did well for themselves in practice ahead of the tournament. So seeing that translate so seamlessly was a sight to see for sure. And yeah, I think it was a solid first showing. I do like the energy of the cast. Um, and the two of us, we did talk before the show that it was like a little bit, we don't want to call it like a Tour Butters impression, but in terms of the role within the cast,
Yeah.
it was like relatively comparable to like NA's premier hype man in a way. But I don't
Which
know,
I think
like
is a
I
huge
actually
compliment.
couldn't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I couldn't really watch much of the stream because I was in Gdansk competing. Um, but yeah, maybe I know that Jox is very open to constructive criticism. So if you have
Mhm.
anything to say, just from like a established caster's perspective, I would give you the opportunity ready and right now.
Sure. So your sentiment that it was a really strong debut, I think that stands. Um, what I want to say is that we have some casters. For example, Tomahawk. Right. I've said this to friends who have asked me what I thought about his casting. Um, Tomahawk came in with one of the highest floors of any caster that we probably have on NA or EU, regardless. Right. Um, very well spoken, well poised, great analytical insights. Also, nice hype. Right. He's got all the right tools, and the question becomes, where does he take that floor, right? Because you can have a super high floor, but if you don't start to grow with everyone else, then you might not ever hit your ceiling. And what I find with Jocks is that he does have a high floor and all the right tools, but it's right now it's just a little rough around the edges in terms of controlling the flow of the narrative, right? Because this is an analogy that I use when I talk to people about casting theory. um, when you watch a movie, right, you see action on screen. Maybe it's character dialogue, maybe it's traveling to a new location, maybe it's a fight scene. When you're watching those things happen, if you listen very intently to the score of the movie emphasizes what's happening on screen. It rides the ebbs and flows. It's never out of place if it's a good movie. And I feel like as a commentator, you need to be aware not only of where the story is going, but it also at what point you are in the movie. So you could have like a really bang opening scene that gets everyone's attention. That's usually like the intro, right? That usually is what gets people hooked. It gives them something to look forward to, sets up some storylines that are really fascinating. But then there's typically like a lull for a little while. And I feel like something that Butters has gotten better at, that Jocks is going to need to work at, is just finding the flow of the movie and being the best soundtrack. Because I mean, if you watch movies, like my favorite movie of all time is Interstellar. If you watch Interstellar, the music makes the movie. It's just so incredible to kind of go along that journey. And I feel like that's the caster's biggest responsibility is to help the viewer along the journey. So Jux has the hype. He's got all the right tools. I just feel like be getting more in line with the flow and the theme of what's going on screen is going to be one of his challenges. But he already starts with a really high floor. I cannot wait to see where his ceiling goes. This is a very strong debut, and I can't wait for Jox to refine and improve and excel.
Well, I'm really glad that I asked you this question because that was a fantastic explanation. Like, so immersive as well. I do love Interstellar as a movie too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here, and I am
Yeah.
very much looking forward to see where Jox takes that because again, I know him as somebody who is like very willing to put in the work and
Hmm.
just like make the most of his potential. So
Yeah.
yeah, looking forward to the next opportunities he'll get on the scene.
I did
Um,
a grassroots tournament with Jocks, and I remember thinking like, oh, this guy's cooking. This guy knows what he's doing, right? So he's already impressed me. So now the question becomes, how can he grow within his own framework? The last thing I'll say is that you don't need to copy other casters. I think that Jay and his style appeals to a huge piece of the audience that probably has been feeling a little left behind or left out of some of the casts that we've had recently. Because as the skill level goes up, a lot of casters will try to match that level, and they'll try to speak to those top players. But I feel like what Jay did so well is that he just, again, it felt friendly, it felt informative, it felt welcoming, it felt fun, which I think is really important. And yeah, just like with Jocks, I don't want to leave Jay out in the cold. It's going to depend on how they develop, and they should stay themselves, right? I don't want to commentate like inadequates. I
Yeah.
probably could never pull it off that way. I don't know if people could commentate like me. Everyone's going to be different, and you need to embrace that, right? So but anyway, incredible tournaments. We had 2 EU events and one in Australia. We're headed down to Las Vegas this weekend. Viva Las Vegas. Can't wait for that one. Then we've got LAIC with a limited meta. ZZ, I don't know if you and I are going to have the time or bandwidth to put together an LAIC meta preview, but I will say, again, on the theme of casters, this is a fascinating casting challenge that our team is going to have with DeFi, Phoebe, Rise, and Leo. This is a very technical challenge, and it's going to be really difficult. I don't want to say difficult. It's going to be really new for players to kind of know these matchups inside and out, to know the breakpoints, the bulk points, to know shielding scenarios, energy advantages, interplay between the Pokemon, because this does feel like a very neutral meta for LAIC. And it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to get away with saying, oh, we have another Gyarados mirror. Oh, here comes the crunch. That's just not going
I
to work.
also I also think that you have to prepare for the LAIC cast like a player. And I think like probably somebody like Rice is going to be very adept at that,
Yeah.
where you do know how to approach an event like that from the perspective of a previous like multi-regional champion, where even though this meta feels fairly condensed, I don't think we'll see a lot of variety in Top Cut. We will need to like have an insight about like okay, there's like Gudras that will appear here and there with a lot of bulk and breakpoint considerations that flip certain matchups. There's going to be the discussion between Incinerate and Ember Turtonator. There's going to be a discussion between Celio or Dugong. There's going to be Dugongs that beat other Dugong by virtue of having breaks and bulk points against the mirror match. So I feel as if there's a lot of intricacies that need to be firstly understood and then also presented to an audience in a way that is seamless and that goes with the flow of the narrative. So it is a very challenging environment to work in. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I will be in Sao Paulo for LAIC competing with a team that I have no idea what it will look like. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a very different experience. The first limited meta event in the Pokemon Go Championship Series. And yeah, I would love to squeeze in at least a little bit of a preview for that next week.
Yeah.
Because I will be preparing for it anyway, so may as well share some of the theoretical insights without revealing too much about my own team.
I was watching back some of Inadequence's stream when he was doing an LAIC practice tournament. There are not a lot of home run charge attacks. You're not just going to get a full fledged knockout right off the bat. You're not going to see like a Alolan Raichu versus Gyarados in these polarizing matchups. You're going to see a lot of the same Pokemon, and it's going to be very few and far between that a charge attack just completely knocks something out and just
Half of
ends the
the
matchup.
charge attacks will just be brutal swing. Like you have a
Yes,
Rodriguez, an Oranguru, a Turtonator. They just keep
spam it.
swinging.
Spam the brutal swing. I need you know what I need to do, ZZ. I actually need to look at the average pacing for all these Pokemon and figure out how much faster this meta is than the Open Great League. It's going to be
Oh,
close because
yeah.
when you look at a lot of these Pokemon, they're 8 turns, 9 turns, 10 turns to the move, and we're going to see a lot of switches, a lot of catches.
Yeah.
Knowing your damage calcs is going to be so important for this meta. So yeah, I don't know. Part of me is like is wishes I could be on that cast just because the challenge is just so enticing. But part of me is relieved that I get to sit back and watch it because it is going to be very interesting. But
It's
yeah,
gonna be a good show for sure.
It will. And I'm glad you didn't cancel your flight. I'm glad you didn't do it. I know you thought about it,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
we
got
didn't actually
nervous.
we didn't actually talk about the that entire thing, right? Like the
No.
you did provide the timestamps for my losers round match in Gdansk. Like not only for that, but like for all the matches in Gdansk day one. And
Yeah.
typically, like between match A and match B, we had like probably like an average of like 20-ish minutes. And then you have the match between me and Stone Collection. It was like 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 20 seconds. We had so many game issues. It was supposedly something to do with just like the venue Wi-Fi that wasn't even fixable by changing the phones twice. And I will say that um, Stone was a great sportsman. We did
Yeah.
agree to just run back the exact same lines for the first two games, because that was what would have represented the way that match flowed most accurately. We even agreed on playing out the lead matchup the same way, catching the move at the exact same time in the first game. And then we did agree to do new lines for game three because he had the lead call. I executed a really good play. So there was one advantage there, one advantage there. We could
Mhm.
just cancel it out and do new lines. So that was like, honestly, a very, like it wasn't a great experience, obviously, because you don't want to be stuck on stage with the game not working. But as far as stressful disputes go, I'm glad it was against Stone.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm minorly frustrated about, like I've essentially moved past that already, but I should have escalated the last dispute because
Mm,
on stage we only looked at one of three instances of lag, and I think there was one that was very decisive that happened before the one that was looked at, and I don't know. I don't want to like put any personal blame onto anybody, but I think that um I would want judges to, if something's like super laggy, just watch the game from front to back. Just like watch
mm,
everything once, because it's very easy to overlook something, especially after a whole hour of dispute action leading up to that. But
yeah.
again, the toucan is on the graphic. That's all I wanted to do, so it's fine.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, there's got to be like a high degree of fatigue that sets in. And I think I messaged you about it right after watching the stream. I was like, man, what kind of cruel poetry is this that you have this lag situation against one of your countrymen, and it's just such like a uncomfortable position to be in. But hey, if you're both in the same boat that's sinking, at least you're there with a friend, in the meanwhile. So I understand what you're saying, and that was a little bit tough to watch. And I did notice that as well when I was entering the timestamps. I was like, my gosh, an hour gap. Talk about hogging the stage easy. You just can't get out of there, man. Come on.
No.
But no, I'm just pulling your leg. But it was an incredible couple of weekends of tournaments. I'm grateful that you will compete at LAIC. I'm excited to see what you do there. Um, two EU events, one in OC. We're headed down to Las Vegas, like I talked about, and then LAIC. All of you Spite Ops lovers out there, you're going to need to wait a little while longer because it is a 2 week buffer after the Tuesday of release. So we will not see Spite Ops until the following event in drumroll Stuttgart, which is going to be really fun. I don't know if Spite Ops will be making waves. Maybe.
So to say, I will make a prediction right now. We will not be seeing Spine Ops. It has all the
Ah,
tools in terms of stats and moves,
yeah,
but being a mono bug type is just so difficult for it.
yeah, yeah. I understand. I have a rank 12. I need to build it, and then I'll try
I
it out.
built a
But
rank 13 the other day, almost
ah,
twins.
very nice, very nice. I'm sure I'll come to the same conclusion as you though. If you're not feeling it, I doubt that I'll be feeling it. But
That's fair.
I'm trying to think. You know what? I think it's time. Speaking of new releases and fun Pokemon, I think it's time to talk about our wild area raffle. What do you say?
Oh, let's go. If
All
anybody
right,
still made it up until this point of the podcast,
you're a
you are
real
the
one.
true fans. Like you actually you should get a ticket for the Wild Area event just for listening all that much.
Look
But
under your seat.
unfortunately, that's not how it's being decided. We actually had a little bit of a randomizer doing the Lord's work ahead of this recording. So we actually do already know the two lucky participants. And
Yes. So before we say the names, I will say two things. First, there's a timestamp. I'm going to make sure there's a timestamp here, so all of our friends that are listening can go to the actual 2 hour, 38-minute block, so they can actually hear this. And secondly, I will say that the contest rules were that you had to leave a review and then screenshot that review and reply to the original post. So if you're listening to the show and you went on Spotify or you went on Apple Music and you gave it a 5-star review, thank you. Thank you so much. If you haven't done that already, then I highly encourage you to do it. It would help us a lot. But for those of you that did leave the 5-star review, but then did not reply to our post, where we don't know that you actually left the review. There's no way for us to figure out who that was. So although we appreciate it, we couldn't involve those people in the contest. We had 5 names actually leave us reviews, whether it was on Spotify or YouTube comments or whatever it might be. And we're grateful to all those people. We had Obetamac, C. Maglio, who left a very funny review. We had Daniels BO 1990, Chad is Bubbles, and Calais Special. And we did our randomizer as ZZ mentioned. ZZ, you ready for the first name?
Yes.
Our first winner is Daniels BO 1990. After this episode goes live, Daniel, we will contact you. And if you already purchased your wild area ticket, then we'll just give you its equivalent in terms of gift monies. And then our second winner, ZZ.
It is Obedomac, who is a longtime supporter of our anything, really. Like, he's such a good dude. I did
Yes.
talk to him at, I think, last USC, it must have been. Yeah, very, very positive character within the PvP scene. And yeah, certainly somebody that is a longtime supporter. So
Yeah.
we do love that. We do love to see it.
Yeah. Absolutely love Obed. Awesome guy. Love spending time with him and love seeing him at tournaments. I I cannot confirm or deny, but he might be competing at LAIC. So maybe we'll see. Maybe you have a chance to bump into him. That would be an awesome photo op, actually. Obed,
Sure.
if you end up at LAIC, go find this guy. Go find our German friend and take a photo with him because that would be awesome. I would love that. But that's going to be our giveaway. We'll reach out to both of you after the episode goes live. I'm excited for the wild area. I've seen some posts about it. It looks fun. The spawns look really cool. I think that there's this weird humanoid aspect to Dynamax Grimmsnarl that is kind of unsettling. It kind of makes me feel
I
weird inside, like the
I like
uncanny
the
valley.
Grimmsnarl line. Like, I think
Yeah.
the whole impotent Morgrim Grimmsnarl. I don't know how viable they're going to be for PvP. They do have Sucker Punch. They do have a unique typing. I think
Mhm.
they may need like a little bit help with their charge attacks still, but there's potential for that down the line because they do
Yeah.
receive, I think, even multiple signature attacks. So maybe there's potential for the future, and it's certainly a design that I'm pretty fond of. So yeah, I'm glad that we just recently, like I think last year was the very first wild area, and that was a blast. I love that we have all those various big events going on
Mhm.
every 3 months essentially.
Yeah.
With I don't know, I think we don't have one for springtime just yet. Like we do have the Go Tour in winter, and we do have the Go Fest in summer. We may still need something for spring, but I love that fall is a little more fun now with the mighty Pokemon appearing in the wild, being almost level 50 at times, and
Yeah.
more likely to be extra, extra large, IV floor of 13. There's a lot of fun to be had with that. And yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to it. The week already started where we see some wild spawns. We see like an extra pass. We see a silver bottle cap that can be earned, which is going to be huge for PvP. So if you're into that, certainly worth checking out. And yeah, I think it's going to be fun. I'll certainly be playing that this weekend, in between watching Vegas. And yeah, I can't wait to be back on the show next week because what happens in Vegas will not stay in Vegas. We are going to talk about it.
Yeah, we will. We'll recap Vegas and we'll talk about LAIC because that's the following week, right? So we'll figure out what's going on. To give you guys an idea of how Grimmsnarl is going to play, it actually has a very similar stat product to Scizor. So about as bulky. It's a Dark Fairy type. Recommended moveset on PvPoke right now is Sucker Punch with Play Rough and Foul Play, but it also has access to Power Up Punch. So there is kind of a bait potential. It almost reminds me a bit of like Toxtricity, which is kind of like this weird dual typing that you don't see very often. You can run pup, or you can run something that hits hard and gets stabbed, like play rough or foul play. So I don't know if it'll be good. It might be better in other leagues, but it's an exciting addition either way. And yeah, the mighty Pokemon, I almost forgot about that. That's going to be sick. But uh, but yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else we need to cover. I think you've got one more note here. Sydney Regional re-announced.
Yes. So even more, even more opportunities for the Australians to fend off all the APAC invaders. Um, and yeah, that is going to happen, I think, in the new year eventually. I don't have it in front of me just now.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's going to be
I'll tell
one
you.
down the line.
I added it to my notes. It's February 7th and 8th, the same weekend as Santiago.
Okay, okay, okay. So a little snapshot ahead of UIC, even though we do not yet know whether UIC is even going to be played in the Open Great League format, because LAIC is setting a little bit of a precedent here. So that remains to be seen. But either way, looking forward to discuss even more regionals down the line.
Exactly. There's a lot to do, a lot to cover. But for this episode, I think we've reached the end of the road. We're at 2.5 hours. Another, as ZZ and I were talking about before recording, another Sisyphean size boulder that we are going to have to edit and produce. But I will get that going for all of our loyal listeners. But ZZ, it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. I'm excited to see you at LAIC. I will be watching the stream from home. I'm excited to see what you play, what spice you bring, and I hope you have a wonderful time in Sao Paulo, because it's a beautiful country with wonderful people.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Well, it's been a good one. We'll see you all next week, everybody, and we'll reach out to our wild area contest winners. Until then, keep on tapping.